The 13-year-old girl took off her glasses and looked straight into the woman's eyes. Unexpectedly, she could read everything the woman was thinking. She even knew that this woman was a scammer. It turned out that since birth she had possessed a special ability. She could read other people's thoughts just by looking into their eyes. The girl's name was In-A. She was the third generation of the Bok family. All members of the family possessed extraordinary powers. For example, In-A's grandmother could predict the future through sleep, and In-A's aunt Dong-hee had the ability to fly in the sky. Especially In-A's father was Guiju. He could travel back in time, but at present they could not use those powers because the grandmother suffered from severe insomnia, and Dong-hee could not fly because she was too fat. Guiju also could not return to the past because he was depressed after losing his wife 7 years ago. That day, the whole family went to a cliff on the sea to try his superpowers again, but the results were unsuccessful. Man-hoim had a huge headache because of the family situation now. If this continued, those powers would most likely disappear forever. Suddenly, Guiju fell into the sea. Luckily, a brave girl jumped in to save him. After both of them successfully got to shore, Guiju mistook the girl for his deceased ex-wife. He immediately hugged the girl and fainted. The whole family took him to the hospital for a checkup. Luckily, he was fine. A few days later, Mrs. S. Man-hoim went for a massage to treat her insomnia. Not only that, she also offered a prize of 1,000 won to anyone who could make her sleep. Even though she had insomnia, she refused to take sleeping pills because she was afraid of side effects and drug resistance. No one in the shop would accept because she was too difficult. Only one new employee named Da-hae accepted the challenge. Everyone was happy and agreed to let Da-hae do this task. Before starting the massage, Da-hae offered Mrs. Man-hoim a cup of herbal tea. She shared that this tea is very good for improving sleep. Mrs. Man-hoim trusted her and drank a cup of tea. Then Da-hae started the massage treatment. Mrs. Man-hoim felt a clear difference compared to the other staff here. Thanks to Da-hae's skillful hands and professional techniques, Mrs. Man-hoim gradually fell into a deep sleep. When she woke up, Mrs. Man-hoim felt extremely surprised and satisfied with Da-hae's service. She decided to give Da-hae 1,000 won as promised. When Mrs. Man-hoim looked closely at Da-hae's face, she suddenly realized that Da-hae was the one who saved her son a few days ago when Guiju fell into the sea. Mrs. Man-hoim was overjoyed and quickly gave Da-hae more money with deep gratitude, but Da-hae refused and said that she had not slept comfortably here. Seeing that, Mrs. Man-hoim had the idea of inviting Da-hae to her house to continue the massage treatment. Da-hae looked at the massage parlor owner. Mrs. Man-hoim understood and immediately gave the owner a tip. The massage parlor owner immediately agreed to let Da-hae have an additional massage service at home. Da-hae promised to come to her house tomorrow. Mrs. Man-hoim was extremely satisfied with Da-hae's skills. The next day, Da-hae went to Man-hoim's house. Da-hae was surprised by the luxury of the house. Man-hoim invited Da-hae to her garden to finish the massage. At the same time, Guiju's room was filled with empty wine bottles. Since he had been depressed, he had been drunk almost every day. Since he ran out of wine, he went to the kitchen to get another bottle. While he was opening the bottle, he saw Da-hae coming down to make herbal tea. She offered to help him, but he didn't care. When he walked past Da-hae, she intentionally spilled the wine bottle and looked worried about him. She helped him pick up the pieces. Just then, Mrs. Man-hoim walked in and saw this scene. She thought that Da-hae had saved her son twice, so she was very grateful. Guiju's attitude was still very cold, even though he knew that Da-hae was the one who saved him. This made Mrs. Man-hoim extremely ashamed of her son and pulled him out. Da-hae waited until she was alone in the kitchen and quickly mixed some medicine into the herbal tea. After making sure that the medicine had completely dissolved, she brought the tea to Mrs. Man-hoim. Then she started massaging Mrs. Man-hoim. Meanwhile, Da-hae told that her parents had passed away and that she had been married twice. Her first husband was an adulterer and her second husband was abusive. However, she still dreamed of a happy family. Mrs. Man-hoim felt sympathy and realized that her son shared the same pain as Da-hae. Mrs. Man-hoim said that Guiju got married early, but unfortunately his wife passed away. He still couldn't forget his wife and became depressed. When Da-hae left, Mrs. Man-hoim was very pleased and praised Da-hae to her husband. Before she could finish speaking, she fell asleep without realizing it. In her dream, she saw Da-hae wearing the Bok family heirloom ring. When she woke up, she told her husband about it, so she guessed that Da-hae was destined for Guiju. Perhaps thanks to Da-hae, Guiju was able to escape his depression and recover his superpowers. So Mrs. Man-hoim told her husband to immediately schedule an appointment for Da-hae to come to her house. On the other side, Da-hae went home to take a bath, which was her house. It turns out that her family is not dead. Her mother works as a back scrubber at a sauna. Although she is a scammer, Da-hae also has a weakness. She's afraid of fire. Cooking a pack of noodles is also a challenge for her. In the end, because she was so scared, she ate the noodles raw. Guiju's family owns a building worth 50 billion, in which Guiju owns a gym in that building. That day, a beautiful girl with a sexy body named Grace came to apply to be a trainer there. Guiju hired her without reading her application. When Grace was just exclaiming that it was so easy to apply for a job, Dong-hee, Guiju's older sister, stopped her and checked her application. After carefully examining it and realizing that Grace had a home fitness channel on YouTube and nearly 300,000 subscribers, Dong-hee immediately agreed. Then Guiju came down and gave his sister some money to buy a birthday present for his daughter. Dong-hee was consulting a client about liposuction, but because of her overweight appearance, the client felt insecure. Her pants button accidentally hit the customer's face, causing the customer to angrily leave. The director of this private hospital, who was also Dong-hee's lover, saw that scene and felt helpless. He immediately told Dong-hee that she no longer needed counsel. She looked back at her poster at the clinic when she had not gained weight and felt sad. Then Dong-hee bought some cake to eat. Even though she had not paid yet, she had eaten a lot. But when she swiped her card, all the cards exceeded the limit. She had to use the money Guiju asked her to buy a gift for his daughter to pay. Suddenly, she received a call from her mother, informing her that Da-hae would come to their house to attend in a birthday on Saturday. On Saturday, when Guiju saw his parents preparing food, he wondered why his daughter had never had a birthday party before. Why did she suddenly have one this time? At this time, Dong-hee appeared and said that she would come too. Guiju looked at his sister and realized that she had spent all the money he gave her. Meanwhile, his mother tried to match him with Da-hae. Guiju felt tired and disappointed. Da-hae arrived and was happily welcomed by Man-hoim and her husband. During mealtime, Man-hoim openly stated her intention to have Da-hae marry Guiju. Guiju and his sister immediately threatened Da-hae that their family was very scary. Guiju's daughter was at the age of being naughty, so she would definitely suffer if she married him. Guiju's mother pulled him into the house. Mr. Sungu called In-A down to the party. At that time, only Da-hae and Dong-hee were left. Dong-hee said that she was on a diet, but in fact she was craving lobster, so she asked Da-hae to get her a glass of water. After Da-hae left, Dong-hee began to eat comfortably. Mr. Sungu called his niece down to celebrate celebrate her birthday and eat delicious food. Ine expressed that she only wanted to eat seaweed soup that he cooked. Of course, Mr. Sungu agreed to this simple request from his beloved niece. He went to the kitchen to cook seaweed soup and light candles on a cake for Ine. At the same time, Guiju questioned his mother about why she invited another woman home on Ine's birthday. She replied that she wanted him to forget his ex-wife and live happily again. She did not forget to scold Guiju for previously discouraging the two from falling in love because she did not see a future for them. But Guiju disobeyed her and insisted on getting married. This was heard by Dahae, who was getting water. Suddenly, Ine came down from upstairs and witnessed the whole thing. She came down to blow out the candles on her cake and went upstairs. Seeing his daughter's attitude, Guiju angrily left. At this time, it suddenly started raining outside. Mr. Sungu and Mrs. Manhome ran out to bring in food. Suddenly, Mrs. Manhome felt dizzy and fainted. Mr. Sungu and Donghee rushed her to the hospital. Mr. Sungu asked Dahae to run in and turn off the gas stove for the seaweed soup he was cooking, but he didn't know that Dahae was most afraid of fire. Dahae looked at the gas stove that was burning fiercely. She found a pair of tongs and mustered up all her courage to approach it. Luckily, Ine went downstairs and turned off the stove. Dahae only had time to thank him. Suddenly, Ine asked Dahae what she wanted to put in the soup, because Ine had seen Dahae put medicine in Mrs. Manhome's tea. Dahae explained that it was licorice concentrate, but Ine didn't listen and went upstairs. A while later, smelling the aroma of the seaweed soup, Ine went downstairs again and saw that Dahae had prepared food for her. At first, the little girl refused to eat until Dahae ate first. Then Ine felt at ease and realized that the food was delicious. Dahae also spoke well of Guiju, making Ine feel more sympathetic towards her. Therefore, Ine advised Dahae not to get involved with this family and revealed the secret that her family had superpowers. But now the family is suffering from modern diseases, so the superpowers have been lost. Dahae listened to everything. However, Dahae did not believe it and thought that Ine had a rich imagination. On this side, Guiju went to buy a gift for Ine and then visited his ex-wife's grave. There he met his ex-wife's parents there. His mother-in-law wondered why Guiju was also in an accident, but why he was not injured. Guiju could not explain. When he got home, Guiju found Dahae washing the dishes. Dahae shared that Ine had just had dinner with her. Guiju was extremely surprised because as far as he knew, Ine never ate dinner. Dahae also told her about the day she saved him at sea. She saw him step into the sea to save a little girl's stuffed rabbit, and he did everything. She praised him as a superhero for that action, and she said that in the past, someone sacrificed himself to save her, so she always cherished her own life to repay that person. Dahae's words moved Guiju, but he still tried to act cold. After asking Guiju to wash the dishes, Dahae said goodbye to him and left. Dahae returned to the sauna and was rewarded by her mother with a cup of rice water for her acting skills. Suddenly, Dahae's younger sister walked out. She was Grace. It turned out that Dahae's family lived on fraud. Before Dahae married her two ex-husbands, it was thanks to her and her family's perfect acting. Their whole family received a large sum of money from her two ex-husbands for mental damages as well as divorce benefits. What Dahae's family was aiming for was her ex-husband's property. This time the next victim is Guiju. Dahae tells the story of this family having special abilities. That's why the family got rich from stocks or lottery, and now their family has lost their special abilities due to the disease of the times. Dahae's family laughed at this. They thought it was absurd. The disease of the times was because Guiju's family was too happy and became sick. Guiju went into his daughter's room and wished her happy birthday. He also gave Ine a very cute stuffed rabbit. The little girl immediately put the stuffed rabbit her father gave her in the closet. There were countless stuffed rabbits in there. Ine remembered the accident 7 years ago. Guiju also gave her a stuffed rabbit. Then Guiju returned to the past. Only mother and daughter were left in the car. Suddenly, Ine's eyes changed color, and then the car crashed into a ravine. When Guiju returned to the present, it was too late. When Guiju was 9 years old, he had won a lottery and won the Carp King prize. He was extremely happy to receive the award. When he got home, Guiju saw his mother watching the stock market on the newspaper. He sneaked into the house, but his mother found out because he had gone out. When he showed it to his mother, she broke the prize and beat Guiju with a whip. Suddenly, Guiju returned to the moment when he won the Carp King prize. The whole world was gray and colorless. Only Guiju had full color. It was the first time he used his ability to go back to the past when he remembered a happy moment. A few days later, Guiju returned to that moment again, but he realized that he could only see, not touch, everything in the past. Suddenly, Guiju was shocked when he saw the scene of the little dog and its owner. The dog ran to the intersection and had an accident, lying motionless on the side of the road. The little girl's sobbing made him feel even more heartbroken. Guiju realized that a moment of happiness for him could also be a moment of unhappiness for others. He tried to go back to the past to save the dog but failed, no matter what he did. After returning many times, Guiju did not feel happy at that moment. Partly because of returning many times, the rest was the feeling of guilt in his mind. Since then, Guiju has not been able to return to that moment. Returning to the present, Guiju looked at the pile of teddy bears Ine threw out. It seemed that his daughter no longer liked them. However, the truth was that Ine thought that because of her birth, many bad things happened to her family, so she felt that she did not deserve to receive a birthday present. That is why she threw all the teddy bears away. Before Ine went to school, Guiju observed that someone was following Ine. He told her to be careful when going to school. Guiju went to the mall to buy another gift for his daughter. Dahae had followed him before and pretended to come there by chance. She offered to help him choose a gift, but Guiju refused. Dahae tried to hold his hand, but Guiju pushed it away. Unfortunately, he tore her sleeve. He shyly left to drink beer nearby. A moment later, Dahae appeared in front of Guiju with the shoes he had refused earlier. She begged on to bring the shoes back to Ine. Thinking of his daughter, Guiju reluctantly took the shoes and threw a wad of money on the table. He didn't want to owe Dahae. Then he left without paying any attention to Dahae. While Dahae was drinking beer in the mall, the fire alarm suddenly rang. Everyone ran away. Dahae was extremely panicked. She couldn't move because she was so scared. She could only hold her head and sit down. Suddenly, a hand grabbed her hand. When Dahae raised her head, she found out that it was Guiju. She was extremely surprised because she thought he had already gone home. Suddenly, the security guard announced that the fire alarm just now was just a system error. Dahae turned her head towards the security guard, and when she turned back, Guiju had disappeared. She felt confused and did not understand why he suddenly appeared and helped her when she was panicking. At home, Ine received the shoes outside the door. The girl loved the gift. She smiled brightly and looked at herself in the mirror. Guiju saw his daughter happily receiving the shoes and felt happy inside. A few days later, Mrs. Manhome invited Dahae to her family's gym and said that if Dahae became her daughter-in-law, the whole building would belong to Dahae. Although Dahae really wanted to, she still restrained herself and replied implied that she was not someone who easily got married after going through 2 previous failed marriages. That tactfulness made Mrs. Manhum very pleased. Dong-hee was nearby and observed the whole thing. She pulled her mother aside and warned Da-hae that she might be a scammer. Grace, who was nearby, overheard and signaled Da-hae. Just then, Gui-ju arrived at the gym. Da-hae approached him to thank him for helping her in the fire and even holding her hand to comfort her, but he didn't understand what she said. Mrs. Manhum was very happy to hear that because she thought their relationship had improved. When Da-hae returned home, she wondered why Gui-ju didn't admit to holding her hand. It seemed like he had some secret. At school, In-ae seemed to be an invisible girl. Few people paid attention to her. That made In-ae feel lost and lonely. Currently, In-ae hasn't joined any clubs, even though she really wants to integrate with her friends. However, her shyness and embarrassment prevent her from signing up for any activities. Because of that, the homeroom teacher called Gui-ju and told him to pay more attention to his daughter. The teacher also reminded Gui-ju to sign the information that the school sent to the parents. At this time, Gui-ju found the papers in her daughter's desk box and signed everything. After finishing signing, Gui-ju went downstairs to find some alcohol. Suddenly, Mr. Sungu appeared and invited him to go drink at the restaurant. There were his mother and Da-hae. Gui-ju was about to leave when Mr. Sungu pushed him in. A moment later, Gui-ju's father and mother left to create conditions for Gui-ju and Da-hae to be alone together. However, Gui-ju still acted cold towards Da-hae and continued to drink alone. At the cosmetic clinic, Dong-hee discovered that it was past time and her lover had not returned. The staff said that he was examining a customer. Dong-hee had to wait outside. She heard laughter in the clinic. Unable to bear the laughter, Dong-hee immediately went to check. She caught sight of her lover and Grace happily chatting. The two explained that they were just seeing a doctor, leaving Dong-hee speechless. She felt disappointed and jealous. Dong-hee invited her lover out for a drink and took the opportunity to suggest that they register their marriage so they could soon have a 50 billion building. The reason was that Mrs. Manhum had made a deal with her 2 children that whoever got married first would inherit the 50 billion house. However, her lover refused, saying that they would only consider getting married when they paid off the rent he borrowed from her. Dong-hee knew he was making an excuse to refuse. She still couldn't resist thinking that the reason was her overweight body. Dong-hee was determined to change herself by going back to the gym. She worked hard to lose weight. She believed that only when her body became slimmer would he come back to love her passionately. In another development, In-ae was on her way home when she suddenly stopped. Someone was following her from behind. In ran as fast as she could to the nearest restroom and started calling each family member. But everyone was busy. Grandma was sleeping, Grandpa was busy cleaning, and Aunt Dong-hee was busy losing weight. In-ae had no choice but to call her father, but the person who answered the phone was Da-hae. Da-hae woke up Gui-ju to help In-ae, even though he was currently drunk. But when Da-hae mentioned his daughter's name, Gui-ju woke up and rushed out. When Gui-ju ran to the public restroom, he saw a very suspicious man outside. The man was Da-hae's family member. He was here to follow In-ae. Gui-ju suspected that he was the one who scared In-ae, so Gui-ju immediately rushed to fight the man. The man wanted to fight back, but Da-hae signaled him not to touch Gui-ju and to leave as soon as possible. Gui-ju, drunk, punched the man's helmet. The man pretended to be seriously injured and ran away. At this time, In-ae also came out of the bathroom. Gui-ju comforted his daughter that he had dealt with the stalker and told her not to worry. But In-ae did not understand what her father was saying. She whispered to Da-hae about her problem. It turned out that In-ae ran to the bathroom and called for help because it was her first time on her period, not because there was a stalker. Da-hae helped In-ae buy sanitary napkins and lent her a shirt to cover the bloodstains on her skirt. After successfully taking In-ae home, Gui-ju asked Da-hae out for a drink to thank her. Da-hae recalled the moment when the two held hands at the mall, but Gui-ju still denied it. Da-hae guessed that maybe it was him in the future who held her hand, but Gui-ju insisted that it was not true, because even if he could go back to the past, he would not be able to touch anything from the past, and he was currently depressed, so he could not go back to the past. Dong-hee was still running with increasing intensity. She really wanted to return to her slim body like before. Suddenly, while running, Dong-hee flew up for a moment and fell off the treadmill. Grace saw this and immediately came out to support Dong-hee. When Gui-ju returned home, he remembered what Da-hae said when he held her hand. He tried to close his eyes, and sure enough, he had returned to the moment the fire alarm rang at the mall. The whole world was gray. Only Gui-ju had full color, and he was able to touch her. It turns out that Da-hae wasn't lying. He really held her hand. Gui-ju returned to the present. His ability had returned. Not only that, he could also touch other people, so he tried to go back to the happy moments with his ex-wife and wished he could touch her. Sure enough, he was able to go back, but it was the beach scene when Da-hae saved him. He tried again, this time going back to the moment Gui-ju was with In-ae and Da-hae in the public restroom. Every time he went back to the past, Da-hae was there. He was so surprised by this new discovery. Immediately after that, Gui-ju went to her workplace to clearly question why Da-hae appeared in his mind during his happy moments, but the way he asked was like he was confessing his feelings. Mrs. Manhum saw this scene and immediately told Gui-ju that Da-hae would be the important person to help the whole family regain their lost ability. After that, she suggested that Da-hae quit her job at the spa and move in with them. On the surface, she asked Da-hae to tutor and take care of In-ae, but in reality, the purpose was to get Da-hae and Gui-ju married. Then he saw her waiting at the fountain. Memories of his daughter's birthday flooded back. It turned out that the moment In-ae was born, Gui-ju's entire fire department had to deal with a fire at the high school. His captain passed away in that fire. Seeing the captain's wife and children crying at the funeral made Gui-ju heartbroken, because that day, the captain took the initiative to take over Gui-ju's shift so that he could go to the hospital with his daughter. Gui-ju's happiest moment was also the moment when others were most miserable. During the captain's funeral, Gui-ju suddenly flashed back to the moment his daughter was born. Not far away was that fire. Suddenly, Gui-ju saw the yellow hospital door standing out in the gray scene. He reached out to touch it and succeeded. That was the first time he could touch something in the past. Without thinking much, Gui-ju immediately ran to that high school fire. He saw with his own eyes the captain running into the fire. Then the building collapsed and the captain lost his life. No matter how many times Gui-ju tried to return to the past, he could not save the captain at that moment. Because of that, he was haunted and could not concentrate on his mission. In the end, his boss told him to go for psychological treatment. From then on, Gui-ju quit his job as a firefighter. After that time, Gui-ju sometimes unconsciously returned to the moment his daughter was born, but he could only helplessly watch everyone in the fire, which also caused a lot of trouble for his family, because sometimes he suddenly disappeared and suddenly appeared. On the day of the accident, Gui-ju's ex-wife threatened that if he disappeared today, she would take In-ae away from here. Before he could understand what she said, he had already returned to the past. But this time, Gui-ju did not not go to save anyone, but decided to return to the present with his wife, but it was too late. His wife drove the car down the cliff and passed away, while Ina was lucky to keep her life. Returning to the present, Guiju sadly went home, leaving Dahae waiting for him at the fountain because he thought he would cause trouble for others. At night, Dahae's family gathered. Dahae's mother, Lee Hong, thought that the Bok family was not normal when they thought they had superpowers, so she wanted Dahae to collect a lot of evidence to fight them in court. The next day, Guiju was surprised to see Dahae move into his house. She said that yesterday he went to the fountain and gave her this bouquet of flowers. Manhuim and her husband were there and were very happy to hear the news, but Guiju kept denying it and pulled Dahae out to ask about her lie. But Dahae insisted that not only did he give her flowers, he also hugged her there. Guiju thought that maybe it was his future self who did it, so he let it go. Dahae went in to eat with everyone. Time went back many years ago. On the catwalk, a girl was confidently walking. Everyone was staring at her. That was Donghee's past. She used to be very slim and had a sexy body. After the performance, she jumped from the rooftop and flew. While enjoying the happiness, her body suddenly started to gain weight. Donghee couldn't control her body and fell to the ground. It turned out that it was just a dream. The noise outside the door woke her up. At the same time, Donghee also received bad news that the apartment she was living in was about to be sold. Donghee immediately returned to her mother's house. At that time, Mrs. Manhome was getting a massage from Dahae. Dahae understood and left so that the mother and daughter could talk. Donghee discovered that her family's finances were currently in dire straits due to her mother's wrong investments. Dahae recorded everything outside and then went out to report to her family. When it was time for dinner, Dahae realized that the family refused to eat together. Ina cooked spicy noodles for herself, and when she took off her glasses, Dahae took her glasses. She tried to ask for her glasses back. Dahae told Ine to close her eyes and fixed her eyebrows. That made her prettier. Suddenly, their eyes met. Ine's eyes turned blue, and she could read Dahae's thoughts. It turned out that Ine's superpower was to read other people's thoughts if they looked at each other. She had hidden her ability from everyone, which was why Ine always wore glasses. She realized that Dahae was plotting to take over the building. The next day in class, Ine's glasses were snatched off by a classmate. Because of her severe nearsightedness, Ine couldn't see clearly. Suddenly, Ine's boyfriend picked up her glasses and returned them to her. At that moment, their eyes met. Ine's boyfriend complimented her on her beauty when he saw Ine's bare face. At the gym, Donghee called her boyfriend. She asked him to have dinner with her tonight, but he found a reason to reject her. Donghee immediately called her close friends to ask them to go out to dinner tonight. Grace heard about it. At night, when Donghee was about to leave with her close friends, she saw her boyfriend walking with Grace into the hotel. Donghee immediately ran upstairs to check and saw the two of them kissing passionately in front of the room. At that time, Donghee was shocked, but she just left without doing anything. In fact, Grace intentionally let Donghee see that scene because she wanted Donghee to break up with that bastard boyfriend. The next morning, when her boyfriend came home, Donghee took the initiative to suggest that the two of them stop seeing each other for a while. He said he was worried about Donghee, but he was happy to be free from her. That night, Dahae was cooking soup, but accidentally let the fire catch on the paper next to the gas stove. She panicked and didn't know what to do until Guiju came to help her put out the fire. He realized she was afraid of fire. When Guiju took out the trash, he saw a flower shop outside. There was a bouquet of flowers that looked very similar to the one he gave Dahae. When Guiju picked it up, the owner said that the bouquet was only for sale today because it was almost out of season. Suddenly, he went back to the past with his hands holding that bouquet. The scene was still monochrome. Only Dahae was full of color. Guiju walked in front of her and was about to reject her. Suddenly, a car passed by, causing Guiju to pull Dahae into his arms to avoid the car. That made Dahae misunderstand that he had hugged her. Then she saw the bouquet of flowers Guiju was holding. Dahae thought Guiju brought her flowers, so she happily accepted the flowers, much to Guiju's surprise. At the same time, Mr. Soongu was dancing in the dance hall. This scene was captured by Dahae's accomplices. Meanwhile, Dahae was making tea and putting medicine in it like usual. Suddenly, Donghee returned and announced that she would be living here from now on and wanted to drink the tea Dahae was making. Dahae was startled and stopped Donghee from drinking. Donghee realized Dahae's unusual behavior and immediately asked Dahae if she had mixed anything into the tea. Dahae immediately drank the whole cup of tea and said that she wanted to make Donghee a cup of hot tea, so she stopped Donghee. Then Dahae washed the dishes and fell asleep under Donghee's supervision. Dahae told herself not to sleep. Suddenly, she saw Donghee go into the secret room to rummage through valuables. Dahae secretly followed, even though she was very sleepy, and recorded the scene with the purpose of disqualifying Donghee as guardian. Suddenly, Dahae saw Donghee floating off the floor while trying to get something from above. Dahae couldn't believe her eyes. She looked again, and it was still the same scene. Dahae was so scared that she quickly ran outside, but accidentally made a noise that made Donghee turn back. Dahae ran to the stairs to go to her room and accidentally bumped into Guiju and was caught by him. But before she could calm down, her expression changed again because the mirror did not reflect Guiju's image. She quickly left his arms, screamed loudly, and ran downstairs. Back in the past, after accidentally giving flowers to Dahae, Guiju suddenly returned to the present. The flower cart had gone quite a distance. He remembered the time he held Dahae's hand in the past, but it wasn't because he had feelings for her, but because he was moved that this time he had saved someone with his ability. Guiju told Mr. Soongu. The two were surprised that Guiju's ability had developed. Mr. Soongu then led him to the Bok family's study. There were many books that had been kept for many generations. Mr. Soongu said that in the past, ancestors had also revealed their powers. For example, there was someone who had the ability to breathe fire, but only when they went to war. When an ancestor held his friend's hand in a dangerous situation, his power was revealed. Or a girl who had the ability to transform into another person against her will when standing in front of the person she loved. Gradually, she forgot how to return to her original form. Even if that girl transformed into many other girls, she still couldn't have the love of the person she loved because he already had someone he liked. He drew that person, and surprisingly, it was the original appearance of the girl who could transform. After knowing the truth, the girl had both love and her original form. So Mr. Soongu concluded that Dahae was the key to Guiju's power. But Guiju wanted him to keep this a secret, and the two of them continued to monitor. Then Guiju went into the house and saw Dahae running to the second floor in fear. She muttered that there was a ghost. He curiously walked in the door and saw Dahae walking down to the first floor in fear. Dahae had just met Guiju on the second floor, and now she met him on the first floor, making her speechless. Because she was so scared, plus she had taken sleeping pills earlier, Dahae fainted right there. Just then, Mrs. Manhum and her husband also came in. The whole family was surprised and didn't understand what Dahae Dahae saw. Dong-hee stepped forward and said that because she had flown a little, Dahae might have seen it and was scared. Dong-hee did not forget to question why Dahae entered the secret room of her house. Mrs. Monhome guessed that Dahae was just passing by. The whole family took Dahae to her room and were extremely worried because she did not wake up, but Dong-hee came and said that Dahae was just sleeping. The reason was that Dahae put medicine in Mrs. Manhome's tea and she drank the tea, but Mrs. Manhome did not believe it and thought that Dong-hee was lying in order to take over the 50 billion building. That night, Mrs. Manhome slept and dreamed that Dahae was taken to the hospital from a public bath. She woke up and guessed that it was a bad dream. The next morning, Dahae woke up and remembered everything that happened yesterday. She was extremely panicked and wondered what she saw yesterday. Then Dahae changed her clothes and sneaked out of the room. Suddenly, Dong-hee stepped forward, scaring Dahae and causing her to back away. Dahae still clearly remembered how Dong-hee flew to the hallway yesterday. Suddenly, Dong-hee told Dahae to take a closer look at her toenails. Dahae was afraid that Dong-hee would fly away again, but when she looked down, she saw nothing but her newly done nails. It turned out that Dong-hee was talking about her toenails, and they both burst out laughing. Then Dahae went downstairs to cook breakfast, fried eggs, for Ine. Suddenly, Mrs. Manhome came downstairs and told Dahae about her dream, about seeing Dahae being taken out on a stretcher from the sauna. Hearing that, Dahae was extremely scared because that was her house. She accidentally ruined the fried eggs. Seeing that, Ine also stopped eating breakfast. Dahae chased after her and gave Ine a banana. Ine continued to tell Dahae to escape from this place immediately. Hearing that, Dahae immediately packed her things and sneaked out of the house. Guiju saw all of this. He followed her to the sauna and entered it. Dahae entered the house and told her mother that the Guiju family had supernatural powers. She convinced her mother to let this scam go, but Mrs. Lee Hong thought the Guiju family was paranoid. Her mother forced Dahae to quickly register her marriage with Guiju and then register as guardian. Mrs. Lee Hong did not forget to remind Dahae of the debt her owed. It turned out that she was not Mrs. Lee Hong's biological daughter. Many years ago, Dahae's father died from drinking. During the funeral, Mrs. Lee Hong and her husband came and demanded the money Dahae's father owed her. She forced Dahae to sign an insurance policy that if Dahae died, she would get the money. Currently, Mrs. Lee Hong is Dahae's adoptive mother. Back in the present, Mrs. Lee Hong forced her to carry out the scam plan that the family had originally set out. When Guiju went into the sauna, he was seen by Dahae's uncle, Hyung Tae. Hyung Tae tried to call Dahae to inform her, but her phone was in the cabinet. Hyung Tae watched Guiju while making rice rolls. Guiju was looking for Dahae. After failing to call Dahae, Hyung Tae called Mrs. Lee Hong, but she didn't have her phone with her either. Dahae and Mrs. Lee Hong were talking when Guiju found them. He was very surprised because Dahae called Mrs. Lee Hong mom. He remembered that Dahae had said that she had no family. Mrs. Lee Hong stood up and signaled to Hyung Tae outside. He understood and turned on the fire alarm. Dahae was very scared when she heard the fire alarm. She sat on the ground and couldn't move. Guiju saw that and carried her outside. Suddenly, both of them fell down because the floor was slippery. Mrs. Lee Hong told Hyung Tae to call an ambulance to take Dahae to the hospital. In the hospital, she told Guiju about Dahae's story. It turned out that she was her adoptive mother. A few years ago, Dahae's high school had a fire. She adopted Dahae because she had no relatives. Since Lee Hong was not Dahae's official relative, so Lee Hong wanted Guiju to sign a document confirming Guiju as her guardian. Suddenly, Monhome called. Guiju answered the phone and confirmed that Dahae was in the hospital. At that moment, Lee Hong approached her bedside and told her to wake up. It turned out that Dahae had pretended to faint. She worriedly told Lee Hong that Guiju's family really had superpowers, but Lee Hong didn't care and told Dahae to bring the marriage certificate back. Guiju reported Dahae's condition to Manhome. He then returned and saw that Dahae had woken up. Dahae said that my mother had gone home because she had to watch the sauna. Guiju paid the hospital bill and took Dahae home. In the car, he admitted to her about his superpowers. The whole thing where he appeared before her and disappeared was Guiju of the future. It wasn't that he forgot. It was just that things in the past, even though they happened to her, didn't happen to him. That's all. At the same time, in the past, he could only touch her. When they returned home, Mrs. Manhome learned that her son had told Dahae about the family's ability. She worriedly scolded her son for fear that Dahae would be scared and run away. In the past, when his ex-wife had just died, Guiju had tried to go back to the moment when he was with his ex-wife to save her. But his mother stopped him and said that he couldn't change that because she had dreamed of her father's death before. She tried everything to stop it but couldn't because that future was something that was bound to happen. She scolded her son not to try to change the future. In the past, the ancestors of the Bok family were burned to death for saving others. She advised Guiju to look at reality. Back in the present, Guiju believes that he can save Dahae, so he reveals his ability to her. When Dahae returns to her room, she writes down Guiju's family and the abilities they once possessed. At the dance club, Ine sits quietly in a corner. She listens to the music and watches her friends practice. Suddenly, Ine's boyfriend appears and snatches her headphones and compliments the song she's listening to. From afar, Hiram sees Ine and boyfriend. Her smile disappears, replaced by an expression of dissatisfaction. After club activities, the group goes out to eat tteokbokki. Ine quietly walks in the opposite direction. She enters a convenience store to buy super spicy noodles. Hiram also follows Ine and eats noodles with her. While the two of them are eating together, Hiram asks Ine how she feels about her boyfriend. At that moment, Ine's glasses are taken off by Hiram. Ine immediately reads Hiram's thoughts. It turns out that Hiram also likes Ine's boyfriend. Hiram doesn't want Ine to have feelings for her current boyfriend. Ine has to lie that her boyfriend is extremely annoying. Ine's lie is accidentally heard by her boyfriend. Ine regrets what she said. She thinks that she shouldn't read other people's minds. Hiram looks at Ine and smiles smugly. Although Dong-hee is very determined to lose weight during the day, at night she brings a lot of food to her room. Suddenly she sees her mother sneaking around in front of Dahae's room. Mrs. Manhome is extremely worried and afraid that Dahae will leave because their family's secret has been revealed. Dong-hee knocks on the door to ask, but Dahae comes out and tells her to be quiet. Then she goes into the room, remembering Guiju's words. Dahae thinks of a way and prints out the marriage certificate. Guiju remembers Dahae's accident in the sauna. He goes back to the past with the hope of saving her from the accident. When he saw Dahae, he followed and accidentally walked into the women's changing room. Because he was too panicked, he returned to the present. Feeling shocked by the scene, Guiju went to the bathroom to flush the toilet to help himself regain consciousness. Then he continued to return to the past. But Guiju returned to the moment when Dahae panicked and stepped out of the secret room. When she stepped up and almost fell, luckily Guiju caught her in time. Then Dahae thought he was a ghost. She pushed him away and ran downstairs. Guiju understood why Dahae was so scared that day. Guiju returned to the present. He came out of the bathroom and Dahae also also came. She gave him the marriage certificate and said that Guiju of the future gave her this and said that the two of them needed to register their marriage as soon as possible. Realizing that Guiju was suspicious, Dahae immediately told him about her past. On the day the high school burned down, someone came to save her. That person was Guiju. That's why she wanted to marry him. However, Guiju replied that it was the wrong order. If they really had feelings for each other, they would get married. Then he went up and kissed Dahae. The two kissed passionately. Suddenly Dahae stopped because she felt someone watching her behind the door. Then she returned to her room. Suddenly she saw something outside the window. When she opened the curtains, she discovered Donghee flying outside. Dahae immediately backed away because she was so scared. She remembered that this whole family had superpowers. She started to lose confidence when facing them. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Mrs. Manhome came over and said that she was having trouble sleeping right now. She wanted to ask Dahae for help. The two of them went down to the kitchen. Mrs. Manhome told a story while Dahae made tea. She said that in her recent dream, she only dreamed of Dahae. That made Dahae startled and scared. Then she walked over and held Dahae's hand and excitedly said that she dreamed of Dahae holding her family's heirloom ring in her hand. This made Dahae tremble with fear. Mrs. Manhome did not know that Dahae was hiding sleeping pills in her hand. Just a little more, and everything would be exposed. Guiju did not believe what Dahae said. He wondered if what she said was true. Then he went to sleep on the couch. But every time he closed his eyes, he would go back to the past when the two of them kissed, causing him to wake up in panic. After that, he tried everything, but every time he lay down, he would go back to that moment, making him extremely angry. The next morning, Guiju saw Dahae vacuuming the house. He saw her slowly walking into the family's secret room. Actually, she was planning to search for his family's safe to steal the family's precious ring. Suddenly, Guiju called out, startling Dahae. He called her out and said that he didn't like their love developing so quickly. He also said that the future she told him might be fake, and he asked her to tell him about how he saved her at school 13 years ago. Dahae avoided telling that story and said that anyway, the two of them kissed and would get married soon, so it was no problem. Guiju said that he did it just to test if he had feelings for her, and he concluded that he didn't have feelings for her. Guiju was slapped by Dahae as soon as she finished speaking. She then angrily turned and left. In the secret room in the house, Mrs. Manhome was shocked to find that her precious watch had disappeared. She hurriedly asked Donghee, but she firmly denied it. However, Mrs. Manhome noticed something unusual in Donghee's actions, so she rushed over to check. It turned out that Donghee was just hiding snacks. The mother and daughter turned their suspicions to Dahae. They sneaked into Guiju's room and caught Dahae trying to hide something behind her back. Donghee aggressively went to check. Guiju and Mr. Sungu also curiously ran into the room to see what was going on. When Donghee snatched what Dahae was holding from her hand, the whole family was surprised to see that it was a marriage certificate. Guiju's parents were extremely happy and told him to quickly go to the district office to register their marriage. Donghee was extremely shocked and couldn't believe this fact. Guiju calmly explained that a small ceremony needed to be held before they officially became a family. At this point, Dahae was forced to reveal her secret. She was an adopted child, adopted by the owner of a sauna. Hearing this, Mrs. Manhome had a bad feeling and asked her husband to investigate the background of Dahae's adoptive mother. At Ine's school, the girl gave Hiram her grandma's watch. It turned out that Ine was the culprit who stole the watch. Hiram happily accepted the watch and hugged Ine tightly. When it was time to leave, Hiram saw Ine's shoes and asked to try them on. Ine accidentally read her mind and knew that she liked the shoes. Ine immediately lent Hiram the shoes. Hiram held Ine's hand and said that they were really good friends. That made Ine extremely happy. It had been a long time since she had a close friend like Hiram. In front of the sauna, Mr. Sungu was there watching and called the detective to investigate Mrs. Lee Hong's house. Unfortunately, Hyun-tae discovered his actions. After arriving at the detective's place, the detective recognized Miss Lee Hong and informed he that she had a history of fraud. She was a loan shark and had never had a debtor who did not pay her. Mr. Sungu was very surprised by this information. He immediately called his wife. But when Mrs. Manhome answered the phone, Mrs. Lee Hong was also at the Bok family's house talking. Mrs. Lee Hong said that Dahae had to quit her job at the massage parlor and come here to live without pay as a maid. That was not what she wanted for her daughter, who had been married twice. Mrs. Lee Hong wanted Mrs. Manhome to quickly give Dahae a status in the Bok family. When Mrs. Manhome asked about her glorious past, Mrs. Lee Hong admitted that she used to be a scammer, but she didn't do it anymore. She took on the job of scrubbing customers' backs to make up for what she had done. After escorting Mrs. Lee Hong out the door, Dahae asked why she came so suddenly. She said that this family was looking for information about them, so she had to come to stop them in advance. It was also to speed up the marriage process for Dahae. When In-A returned home, Dahae realized that she was wearing a different pair of shoes than the one she had this morning. Dahae realized that In-A might be being bullied. Dahae remembered her school days when she was bullied by her friends who poured milk on her shoes. That day, she had to go home barefoot, so Dahae really wanted to help In-A. Dahae went upstairs to ask In-A about school. In In-A's room, Hiram had just invited her to the group chat. The group went to the park on the weekend. In-A had a happy smile on her face. Suddenly, Dahae walked over and continued to ask her about school. In-A accidentally looked into Dahae's eyes. Dahae thought she was being bullied, so In-A quickly said that she wasn't being bullied. This made Dahae suspect that she could read other people's minds. Dahae tried to think that there was a very big spider behind In-A, but at that time, In-A was wearing glasses, so she only found Dahae's actions a bit strange. On the other side, Grace was being bothered by a student in the gym. She contemptuously refused him and was immediately beaten by him. Luckily, Donghee came to Grace's rescue in time. To thank Donghee, Grace invited her to eat barbecue. Donghee said she didn't eat, but she still went. She even ate a lot. The two confided in each other. Donghee said that everyone judges others by their appearance. For example, the girl who lives with her was the one who stole the watch, but Donghee's mother suspected her. Obviously, the girl living with her was Dahae. Hearing that, Grace accidentally said that there was no need to steal that cheap watch because when they got married, they would take over the 50 billion won house. Donghee asked Grace how she knew the value of that house with a suspicious look. Grace lied and said that everyone knew the market price of that house, but this statement didn't fool Donghee. After Donghee returned home, Mrs. Manhome called Donghee and her husband into the kitchen and announced the important news that Dahae's adoptive mother had a criminal record. Because of that, she thought about it all afternoon. Mr. Sungu wanted to help Dahae, so he said that she had nothing to do with her adoptive mother. But Donghee thought differently. She had more reason to confirm that Dahae was a fraud and told her mother to quickly kick Dahae out of the house. Mrs. Manhome wondered what the dream the day before of Dahae wearing her family heirloom ring meant. Donghee said that it was possible that Dahae stole their family ring and and said that the dream was a warning to her. At the same time, Guiju and Dahae were in the living room. Guiju continued to ask Dahae how he saved her 13 years ago. He still didn't believe what she said. He himself always wanted to use his ability to save people, and he kept returning to that moment for a long time without saving anyone, so her answer was very important. Seeing her avoiding the question, Guiju went back to the past when she slapped him that afternoon. At that time, she also avoided his question. After the two went in different directions, he noticed that her shoelaces were untied. Looking at her pained expression, Guiju guessed that she probably didn't want to mention what happened 13 years ago because it brought up unpleasant memories. Guiju realized that he was wrong to keep asking Dahae. He walked over to her and helped her tie her shoelaces. He then returned to the present and apologized to Dahae for making her remember the terrible things. The next day, Mr. Sungu came to Guiju's room to convince him to open up to Dahae. Guiju was afraid that he would mess up again this time, but Mr. Sungu said that he would definitely mess up, but he could go back in time and fix it, because Dahae was very special. Before Mr. Sungu could finish speaking, Guiju returned to the past when the two kissed. He wondered if he should love again. Then he went out and saw Ine go into the secret room to steal a watch. It turned out that she was the culprit. Guiju muttered that if Ine liked it, he could buy it for her. Why would he do that? Hearing his daughter whisper that you would like it, he guessed that she was being bullied at school. Guiju immediately went to school to find the homeroom teacher to talk. At the same time, Dahae also went to Ine's school to bring her shoes. But when Dahae asked the students at school about Ine, Dahae realized that very few students knew her. Some female students even thought that Ine was Hiram's servant. A while later, Dahae met Ine walking with Hiram from the schoolyard. Dahae realized that Hiram was wearing the watch that Ine stole and Ine's shoes. Dahae asked Ine to go somewhere else to talk. Dahae said that Ine's strange behavior lately was because of her friend Hiram, right? Dahae said that if Ine didn't tell the truth, Dahae would report this to Ine's family. Ine threatened that if Dahae did that, Ine would denounce Dahae as a scammer to everyone. Dahae was surprised by that statement. Ine said that I kept this a secret because I wanted my grandmother to suffer some consequences for her habit of relying on her superpowers. Moreover, this was the first time Ine had seen a scammer in real life, so she found it interesting. Then, to increase the persuasiveness, Ine took off glasses and looked straight into Dahae's eyes and said that her two previous marriages were also scams. The first time was to take revenge on Dahae's mother, who abandoned her children to follow another man. The second time was to take revenge on her alcoholic father. But the third time, Dahae did not continue like that because she was controlled by her emotions. Dahae went from surprise to panic. Ine saw all of Dahae's thoughts. Dahae also knew that Ine had hidden her ability all along. Dahae tremblingly called Huntae and said that everything had been exposed. This family of superpowers was real, and they absolutely could not deceive this family. When Dahae was convincing Huntae to believe her, she suddenly saw Guiju at school. Dahae panicked and ran in another direction. She accidentally ran into the school gym's warehouse. Very quickly, someone locked the warehouse because they thought there was no one inside, so she was locked inside. Dahae called Huntae to ask her uncle to pick her up. Suddenly, the phone ran out of battery. Dahae used all her strength to call for help and find a way out, but failed. She also fell to the floor when trying to climb up the window. This scene was exactly like 13 years ago, when she was also locked in the school warehouse by her friends. They said that if at least one person in the school noticed Dahae missing, they would release her. But that day, no one noticed Dahae's absence in class, not even the teacher. Suddenly, a fire broke out in the school, and everyone ran out in panic. Dahae was locked inside. Hearing the noise and smoke, she was scared and called for help and tried to find a way out. In the end, she fell down and intended to give up. Back in the present, Guiju opened the gym's warehouse door and saved her. Dahae cried and recounted her accident 13 years ago. At that time, she was locked in the 5th floor warehouse when the incident happened. Guiju recalled the moment he returned to the past. A group of female students begged their senior to run into the 5th floor warehouse to save someone, and it turned out that person was Dahae. Guiju seemed to realize something. He affirmed that he would save her. Hearing that, Dahae immediately recalled the past. Although she couldn't remember the face of the person who saved her, she knew that the man had a wound on his neck. But now Guiju didn't have that wound. She thought that Guiju wasn't the one who saved her. After helping Dahae out of there, Guiju received a phone call from Ine's homeroom teacher. Dahae took the opportunity to rush home and told Hyuntae the truth about Guiju's family with superpowers. Of course, he didn't believe her. He even thought that she had feelings for Guiju, so she made an excuse not to participate in this scam. While the two were talking, Mrs. Lihong walked in and asked about the progress. Dahae said that after Mrs. Lihong appeared in their family, their attitude towards her had completely changed. Dahae suggested that they should have a plan to withdraw from that family. Guiju met the teacher to ask why Ine took the watch. The teacher explained that the watch was a birthday gift from Ine to Hiram. The two girls were close friends. Moreover, Hiram treated Ine very well. Hiram even invited Ine to join the dance club. That information made Guiju feel extremely surprised. He realized that he didn't know anything about girls before. After that, Ine was taken home by Guiju. In the car, Guiju kept asking about what happened at school, but Ine didn't care to answer because she was busy replying to messages with Hiram. Hiram texted Ine, asking if she thought she was bullying Ine, because the homeroom teacher called Ine in and asked. Ine quickly apologized to Hiram and affirmed that she always considered Hiram a close friend. Guiju tried to talk to his daughter, but Ine was angry at him for going to her school and talking to the homeroom teacher. Dahae suggested that she wanted to talk to Guiju, so Guiju went home to look for Dahae, couldn't find her at home. So he went to the sauna and asked for her whereabouts. Huntae showed Guiju where Dahae was. Thanks to that, he successfully found her. Guiju then asked Dahae to find out why Ina stole Mrs. Manhome's watch. Dahae refused to help him and suggested that they should not see each other again. She gave the excuse that she was scared when she saw the superpowered family showing off their powers, so she left. Dahae also insisted that he wasn't the one who saved her. She also asked him to move her belongings back home, but Guiju still believed that he was the one who saved her. So after that, he worked out hard, quit drinking, and cooked breakfast for Ine. The family was surprised by his change. Guiju then secretly followed Dahae to the sauna. Because of Guiju's persistence, Dahae agreed to meet Ine at his request. The two met at a coffee shop. As soon as they met, Ine asked Dahae if you had told my father about me stealing Mrs. Manhome's watch. Seeing Dahae staying silent and not answering, Ine asked. Dahae said that she thought Ine could read minds, so she didn't say anything. Ine said that she needed to look into the other person's eyes to read minds. Seeing Dahae deny telling her father about the watch, Ine took off her glasses and looked straight into Dahae's eyes to check. After confirming that Dahae had not told her father about the watch, Ine was was relieved. Ine asked Dahae to come back to her house and promised not to reveal that Dahae was a scammer to anyone. Regarding Hiram, Ine said that she did it voluntarily and hoped that the family wouldn't worry. Dahae met Guiju again outside the car and told him not to worry because Ine had been lonely for a long time. And this is the first time she has a friend, so she wants to indulge her friend a little. However, Guiju still has to keep an eye on Ine because Ine might steal other things, so instead of saving her, he should save his daughter first. Guiju admits that he doesn't know how to be a good father. He promises to save Dahae and Ine. In the following days, Guiju still actively wakes up early to exercise in the morning. Mr. Sunwoo is very happy because his son's depression has improved. He comes to tell Mrs. Manhum the good news, but now she is extremely depressed because her insomnia has become serious again. The reason is that since the day she found out that Dahae's adoptive mother is a scammer, plus Dong-hee's confirmation that Dahae is a scammer, she has been sleepless for the past few days. Mrs. Manhum came up with an idea. She told Dong-hee to go find out about that sauna. Dong-hee obeyed her mother. She pretended to be a customer and followed Mrs. Lee Hong. Suddenly, Dong-hee saw Grace appear and talk intimately with Mrs. Lee Hong. Dong-hee was surprised that they were mother and daughter. Seeing this, Dong-hee was about to go up and expose it, but was stopped by Mrs. Lee Hong and offered to scrub her back. Meanwhile, Grace quickly ran away. When she got home, Dong-hee told her family what she saw, and she concluded that they were part of a group of scammers. Dong-hee also saw Grace enter the hotel with her boyfriend. They must have done that to plot to marry Guiju, get the 50 billion building. This time, Mrs. Manhum began to suspect, but Guiju affirmed that Dahae could be his future wife. After saying that, he returned to the past under everyone's surprised eyes. Mr. Sungu explains that Guiju's ability has been restored since he met Dahae. Not only that, he can also touch Dahae when he returns to the past. Mrs. Manhum and her daughter are surprised by this information. Elsewhere, Ine goes to an amusement park with a group of friends from a dance club. Hiram is trying to take a photo with Ine's boyfriend, but the boyfriend sees Ine standing alone, so he proactively invites Ine to take a photo with Hiram. Ine looks at the happy family with sadness. Suddenly, her boyfriend walks up and gives Ine cotton candy. Hiram asks Ine to take Ine's boyfriend to the merry-go-round. Hiram whispers to Ine that she will confess to Ine's boyfriend here. When Ine brings her boyfriend, she waits for Hiram to return, but doesn't see him. Suddenly, Ine's boyfriend confesses to her, which makes Ine very embarrassed. The girl didn't want to lose her friendship with Hiram. From afar, Hiram saw everything. Hiram looked at Ine with hatred. Guiju continued to follow Dahae to the sauna and asked her to teach him how to cook seaweed soup. Dahae tried to chase Guiju away, but failed. Not only that, Mrs. Lee Hong also entered and asked Dahae to teach Guiju how to cook soup. At the same time, Mr. Sungu and his wife also arrived. Mrs. Manhom saw Gui peeling garlic and was so startled that she almost fainted. She was then led into the sauna. When she looked at the dirty sauna, she wanted to leave, but in the end she still agreed to sleep there under Mrs. Lee Hong's massage. While waiting for Mrs. Manhom to wake up, Mr. Sungu and Guiju ate at the sauna. While eating, Dahae was always worried. She was afraid that Mrs. Manhom would dream something. Sure enough, not long after, Mrs. Manhom woke up in a panic and went straight home. She left everyone in a confused state of mind. When she got home, she warned Guiju not to go to the sauna again, but Guiju refused. He insisted that he definitely wanted to get married. Seeing that she could not stop her son, Mrs. Manhom agreed to let her son marry Dahae. So the next day, Guiju went to the sauna to propose to Dahae with flowers. Dahae was surprised and couldn't believe it. Dahae said that he didn't need to try to save her. She was still living well in front of him. Guiju said that because she was alive, it gave him hope that one day he would save her. That hope helped him try every day. Then he gave her the bouquet. That night, Dahae's family celebrated for successfully fooling Guiju's family. But during the party, Dahae didn't seem happy. She found an excuse to go to her room and go to bed early. Mrs. Lee Hong knew what Dahae was thinking, so she went upstairs and said that if Dahae didn't finish this matter, she wouldn't let Dahae live in peace. Ine was asked to meet Hiram. Hiram threw back the shoes Ine gave her because she was angry about the day they went to the park. Hiram left Ine bewildered, not knowing what she did wrong. She ran home and stole her grandmother's watch. Then the wedding day came. The two mothers smiled and talked happily on the surface, but in their hearts they hated each other. When Mrs. Manhom entered the house, she caught Ine stealing something in her secret place. Mrs. Manhom thought that Ine did it because she was hurt when she saw her father getting a new wife. Mrs. Manhom told Ine to rest assured. After today, no one could take her father away. At the gym, Dong-hee asked Grace to model weightlifting for her. Then Dong-hee gave Grace a very heavy weight and said that she was going to ruin her brother's wedding because she found evidence that Min Dahae was a scammer. Dong-hee found drugs in Dahae's room. Grace accidentally said that it was not drugs, but sleeping pills. Hearing that, Dong-hee rushed home to search Dahae's things, leaving Grace stuck with the weight. When Grace escaped, she rushed over to stop Dong-hee's plan. At this time, Dong-hee had found the Bok family heirloom ring hidden in Dahae's luggage, which would be evidence to expose Dahae. When Dong-hee was about to go out to tell her mother, she met Grace, and the two struggled for a long time. Dong-hee fell down the stairs, but she was not injured and was floating in the air. Grace looked at that scene with a very surprised face. It turned out that Dong-hee could fly. At the same time, a wedding was being held outside. Guiju held Dahae's hand, her face showing happiness. Dahae remembered Guiju's father telling her about his past. Guiju was always taken back to the moment when Ine was born. At that time, Dahae's school was also burned down. Therefore, she was Guiju's hope in the present. Remembering this, Dahae told the truth that she was a scammer. Mrs. Manhom was her third target. Just as Dong-hee predicted, Dahae put sleeping pills in the tea, except for Mrs. Manhom. Everyone was surprised by Dahae's actions. That night, Mr. Sungu's family was cleaning up after the wedding. Dong-hee asked why her mother knew everything but didn't tell the family, making her waste time buying the most expensive real flowers. When Mr. Sungu spoke up to protect Dahae, Mrs. Manhom and Dong-hee continuously scolded Dahae. Guiju kept going back to the moment of the two people's wedding. After Dahae left, Guiju immediately chased after her. Suddenly, Grace and Dong-hee ran over. Both of them argued. Grace said that Dong-hee could fly, while Dong-hee said that Dahae's family was a scammer. Mrs. Lee Hong looked at Mrs. Manhom's reaction and realized that she didn't seem surprised at all. Mrs. Manhom also declared that if Dahae's family kept their ability a secret, she would also ignore the fact that Dahae's family had scammed her family. At the same time, Guiju asked Dahae if she said everything was a scam, would she lie about him saving her from the fire 13 years ago? Dahae admitted that it was a lie. Suddenly, she saw Guiju from the future coming. She looked at both of them in surprise. Then Guiju returned to the present. He tore up the marriage certificate. At the sauna, Mrs. Lee Hong questioned Dahae about why she did that today. Dahae only said that she stopped this scam. This time, everyone in Mrs. astray. Li Hong's family began to believe that Mrs. Man Hong's family had supernatural powers. From that day on, Sungu's family began to see changes in Guiju. He kept going back to the past suddenly, which made the whole family worried because they didn't know his whereabouts. In-A was sleeping in class when her boyfriend came and asked her to go eat spicy noodles. In-A refused. Her boyfriend said that Hiram was also going. At the same time, Hiram came and asked In-A to go eat and took off her glasses. Thanks to that, In-A read Hiram's mind. Hiram thought that In-A shouldn't go with them. Realizing that Hiram was lying, In-A pushed Hiram hard and ran out while her classmates mocked her. Everyone thought Hiram was generous, but In-A didn't know what was going on. In-A dropped her glasses in class and forgot to take them back. Her boyfriend picked them up. In-A ran out into the street and almost got into an accident. People around her ran to help her, but with her ability, In-A knew that they were being annoying and cursed her inwardly. In-A felt scared and miserable. She immediately ran to the bathhouse to find Dahae, but Dahae wasn't home. In-A was greeted by Mrs. Li Hong and Hyung-tae. Mrs. Yi Hong took the initiative to offer In-A rice water and eggs. She wanted to investigate In-A, but the girl was very smart, so she didn't reveal anything. So Mrs. Li Hong opened the door for Dahae to go down. Mrs. Li Hong said to take advantage of In-A at this time. If Dahae does this well, she might forgive Dahae for ruining the wedding. It turns out that Dahae was locked up for ruining the plan. Dahae goes to talk to In-A. In-A realizes that Dahae is locked up, so Dahae covers her eyes and talks to her. In-A says that she lost her glasses and that she accidentally looked into someone else's eyes, so she was very scared. Dahae is the only person In-A isn't scared to see when losing her glasses. Because she feels uncomfortable, Dahae takes the initiative to take In-A to buy new glasses. The two pass by Mrs. Li Hong and she holds In-A back, so In-A reads her mind. After the two buy glasses, Dahae calls Guiju to pick In-A up. In-A sees this and warns Dahae that she read Mrs. Li Hong's mind earlier. If Dahae lets In-A go now, Mrs. Li Hong won't let Dahae be at peace. Dahae ignored In-A's words and still took In-A back to Guiju. Seeing In-A with the person who had deceived his family, Guiju worriedly asked In-A if she was okay. In-A just said that she had come to Dahae herself and that Dahae had fed her and bought her a new pair of glasses. Guiju led In-A into the car. Then he went out to talk to Dahae. Dahae told her to take good care of In-A. Guiju recounted that 13 years ago, his captain risked his life to save a female student in her school's fire. If he wasn't the one who saved her, then it could be the captain. So Guiju advised Dahae to live a meaningful life and not let the captain's sacrifice be in vain. After saying that, Guiju left. When Dahae turned around, she saw the future Guiju smiling. He asked her to take care of herself and pulled her hand to the current Guiju's car. Dahae felt that the situation was unusual, so she refused his offer. The two struggled for a while, which caught Guiju's attention. After seeing Dahae's unusual actions, he realized that it seemed like his future self was talking to her. Future Guiju asked Dahae to pass on the message that Dong-hee was about to be in danger. Guiju needed to go to the gym right away. The two of them rushed there, and sure enough, Dong-hee fell from a high place. It turned out that a few minutes before, Grace wanted to see Dong-hee fly like before, so she turned off all the elevators and left a construction sign on the stairs. At that time, Dong-hee wanted to go down to the first floor because she had an appointment with her lover. She looked down from above and wondered if she should fly, so she climbed the stairs to try flying. Suddenly, Grace appeared and pushed Dong-hee down, hitting Guiju, who had just run over. After that fall, Dong-hee looked up and saw Dahae not far away. Dong-hee thought that Dahae was the one who did everything. Then, Dong-hee fainted. Dahae and Guiju immediately took Dong-hee to the hospital because they were afraid that the fall would affect her health. But when they arrived, the doctor concluded that Dong-hee fainted due to excessive weight loss and that there was nothing serious. After Dong-hee woke up, the first thing she did was call her mother to say that she fell down the stairs. Then she saw Dahae nearby, so Dahae must have planned this. Before she could finish speaking, Guiju snatched the phone and told Dong-hee everything. Unfortunately, Hyung-tae was nearby and heard everything. Outside, In asked Dahae how she knew Dong-hee would be in danger. In threatened to look into Dahae's eyes and force her to tell the truth that Guiju from the future warned her. Dahae could see and touch Guiju from the future. Mrs. Manhome and Mr. Sungu were surprised when Dong-hee told them the news. Mrs. Manhome thought that Dahae had just kidnapped In-A and harmed her daughter. The couple immediately went to the hospital. When they arrived, Mrs. Manhome immediately slapped Dahae hard and told her to stay away from her family. When Dahae left, In-A protected Dahae and told what had just happened. Dong-hee returned home safely. She thanked Guiju for helping her. Their relationship was better than before. In-A told Guiju to go save Dahae. Maybe she was locked up somewhere right now for breaking up the wedding. Hearing that, Guiju felt suspicious. He went back to the past and saw that after Dahae broke up the wedding, she was slapped hard by Mrs. Li Hong. Then Mrs. Li Hong dragged her into the car. Back to the present at the bathhouse, the whole family was questioning Dahae because she kept the secret that only she could touch Guiju when he went back to the past. Suddenly someone came to find her. It was Guiju. He came and proposed a deal. He knew Mrs. Li Hong wanted to take advantage of his family's ability to get rich, so he promised to steal future through lottery or stocks to her on the condition that Dahae had to stay by his side all the time. Mrs. Li Hong and her family agreed, except for Dahae. She said that she refused to be with someone who suddenly disappeared and then suddenly appeared like that. After saying that, she left. Then Guiju went back to the past when they both picked up In-A, and the same thing happened. When Guiju disappeared, Dahae admitted to Mrs. Li Hong that she did not want to participate in this case because she had feelings for Guiju, so she wanted Mrs. Li Hong to respect her decision. The following days, Guiju continuously followed Dahae to the bathhouse, even though Dahae wanted to chase him away. But Mrs. Li Hong's family happily welcomed him. Dahae continued to find another target to scam. This person was a single father. The two made an appointment to meet at a coffee shop. Guiju kept following Dahae. Sure enough, with just a few words, she successfully fooled the single father. She even intentionally caused the cup on the table to fall and broke, pretending to be worried about the single father. Guiju saw it all from beginning to end. He realized that the wine bottle falling was not his fault, but Dahae's trick. Guiju couldn't stand it anymore. He walked in front of them and introduced himself as Dahae's third husband. After saying that, he pulled Dahae's hand and led her outside. When they reached the door, Dahae advised him to spend time doing other things instead of following her. Suddenly, Dahae found another target. She walked up and started to approach him. At this moment, his wife came out. She thought that Dahae was her husband's new lover and was about to make a scene of jealousy. Luckily, Guiju came over and pulled Dahae's hand away. Guiju asked her to go eat with him. Dahae said that if he gave her 10,000 won per hour, she would go. Guiju agreed and took her to a bar, and the two happily talked to each other. Dahae said that she still felt happy the first time she ate red bean shaved ice, or the first time she rode a bike. Suddenly, Guiju returned to the past. At that time, he had just started working as a firefighter and was being reprimanded by his boss for climbing a tree to save a cat. However, in the boss's eyes, he was happy because his subordinate had done a good job, and Guiju smiled at that memory. At this moment, from afar, Guiju saw Mrs. Li Hong and Hing-tae entering the funeral home, which was Dahe's father's funeral. Mrs. Li Hong took all the condolence money and asked Dahe to sign the insurance papers. When Dahe died, the insurance money would belong to her. After the two left, Guiju walked to the funeral and touched Dahe. Dahe was surprised at the man in front of her and asked Guiju who he was. Realizing that the man in front of her was not a bad person, Dahe felt relieved and cried loudly. After Guiju returned home, Ina blocked the stairs and worriedly asked where Dahe was. She took off her glasses to use her powers and was relieved to know that Dahe was safe. At the same time, Mr. Soon-gu was drinking at the bar. A beautiful lady came over and listened to him. Then she leaned her head on his shoulder. Suddenly her husband appeared and grabbed Mr. Soon-gu's collar. He threatened to sue Mr. Soon-gu for molesting his wife. Mr. Soon-gu begged him not to make a big deal out of it. Mr. Soon-gu promised to compensate him. At the gym, Dong-hee checked the camera again and found out that Grace was the one who set her up to fall. Just as Grace walked over, Dong-hee angrily chased after Grace and wanted to push Grace down the stairs. Grace said that she pushed Dong-hee down because she thought she would fly and land safely. Grace begged Dong-hee to forgive her this time, and Dong-hee could do whatever she wanted, so Dong-hee forgave her. On this side, Dahe and Guiju were having an impromptu date under Hung-tae's supervision. Guiju said that he could only go back to the past if the past was a happy memory, so Mrs. Li Hong forced Hung-tae to follow them and did everything she could to make the two of them have a happy date. However, no matter how hard they tried, the two of them still didn't feel happy. Suddenly, Guiju thought of an idea. He suggested that they go with Hung-tae to buy red bean shaved ice in Dahe's hometown, so the two of them took a bus back to her hometown. After buying the shaved ice, Guiju looked at the lottery ticket tonight and entered the photo studio to go back to the past this afternoon. After waiting for the other two to leave, Guiju walked up to Dahe and gave her a bowl of red bean shaved ice. Dahe's face showed great happiness. 13 years ago, she had intended to steal bread. A woman saw that scene. Not only did she not report Dahe, she also took the initiative to pay for it. Then she offered Dahe some red bean shaved ice, which was the first time Dahe had eaten that. The woman recognized Dahe as the female student from the school that burned down last time, so she did that. Recalling those memories, Dahe cried while enjoying the food. Guiju also gave Dahe the winning lottery ticket and said that it was hers. She should use it to pay off Li Hong's debt. Dahe also said that in her luggage there was a relic left by the person who saved her, which was a ring. She hoped that he could return it to the captain's family. Then Guiju returned under Hung-tae's surprised gaze. Before, when he saw Guiju enter the photo studio, he also entered but did not see Guiju anywhere. Suddenly, Guiju came out of the photo studio, making him extremely shocked. In another development, Dong-hee's lover came to the appointment with her. Suddenly, he felt that today was strange. On the way, he heard familiar music. When he entered the coffee shop, he recognized a familiar scent and a familiar cake. All of this reminded him of the time when he liked Dong-hee. At that time, Dong-hae was still a model. He didn't know that Grace had deliberately set up those things to make him remember those things. Then Dong-hee would come to see him by chance. He told Dong-hee that today, her image was all that was on his mind. Thought that the two of them would start a love relationship like before, but he only asked if the two of them would get a 50 billion building after getting married, right? That surprised both girls. Because of that, Dong-hee continued to lose weight. She believed that after returning to her original model form, her lover would care more about her. Because of overtraining, Dong-hee fainted. Grace hurriedly took her to the sauna to rest. The two became closer after this incident. At school, Ine was bullied for her actions the day before. They threw Ine's phone to the ground, breaking it. Seeing that, Hung-tae stepped forward to stop them. Only then did the bullies leave. Ine wanted to go back to the sauna to see Dahe again. After returning to the sauna, Ine was depressed because no one played with her. Hung-tae played with Ine. Whoever lost would have their forehead flicked. This stimulated her competitive nature. Ine immediately took off her glasses and played this game, resulting in Hung-tae's forehead being flicked red. This was seen by Mrs. Li Hong, who began to be suspicious. Mrs. Man-hom then called Dahe out to give her the newly bought car. Mrs. Man-hom did not forget to tell Dahe to stay away from her family. Dahe gave Mrs. Man-hom the winning lottery ticket and told her to take this and not let Guiju bother me anymore. After saying that, Dahe left. Mrs. Man-hom looked at the lottery ticket in surprise. Mrs. Man-hom then realized that Dahe got this thanks to Guiju's ability. On this side, Mr. Soon-gu tried to find things in the family's secret room to sell to pay for debt. After finding nothing valuable, he went into the bedroom and found his wife sleeping. In one hand she held the family heirloom ring, in the other hand she held the lottery ticket. He realized that the lottery ticket could help him at this time. Mr. Soon-gu tiptoed to steal the lottery ticket. When he successfully took the lottery ticket, Mr. Soon-gu stepped out and saw Guiju coming in. Guiju asked about Dahe's luggage. Mr. Soon-gu said that he had cleaned them because Mrs. Man-hom didn't want to see them. Guiju told his father that he was looking for a ring in Dahe's luggage. Mr. Soon-gu realized something and pointed to the ring Mrs. Lau Man-hom was holding in her hand. They saw the Bok family heirloom ring in Dahe's luggage. Mr. Soon-gu said that the whole family suspected that Dahe stole the ring from the family safe. Hearing that, Guiju hurriedly went down to the safe to check, but the ring was still inside. He took out the ring from Dahe's luggage to compare. Surprisingly, the two rings were identical. At that moment, Guiju realized that the person who saved Dahe was not the captain, but him. So, Guiju called Dahe out and announced that the person who saved her from the fire was him. At the same time, Mrs. Man-hom dreamed that her son gave a ring to Dahe in the fire. She woke up in a state of fear. Mrs. Man-hom warned her son about her dream. She also told him to stay away from Dahe, but he reassured her and showed her the two rings. He explained everything to her and said that he had saved Dahe from the fire 13 years ago. Hearing what her son said, Mrs. Man-hom thought about it and realized that the fate between the two of them was still there, so Dahe could be the one to help the Bok family prosper again. Suddenly, she remembered the lottery ticket that won the jackpot and realized that it was no longer there, because the lottery ticket was sent by Mr. Soon-gu to the person who was blackmailing him. Mr. Soon-gu felt relieved and thought that his wife would not find out. However, when Mr. Soon-gu returned, he found that his wife had been sent a picture of him dancing with someone else in a nightclub by an anonymous person. Mr. Soon-gu explained to the woman that he was just a normal dance partner. Why did the woman's husband take the money and then break the deal? At that moment, Missy Man-hom realized that he had taken the lottery ticket to pay the person who was blackmailing him. The two had an argument. Mrs. Man-hom shouted that she had been betrayed by him since she could not dream of him, right? Mr. Soon-gu admitted that he had felt uncomfortable being under her control when she had dreamed of every single thing he did. Mrs. Manholm was disappointed and said that she would free him so he should pack his things and leave the house immediately. When Mr. Sungu was about to leave, Ine came and read his mind. She knew where he really went, back to the group of people who blackmailed Sungu. It turned out that these people knew Miss Li Hong. They colluded with her to trick Sungu, so Miss Li Hong easily got the lottery ticket. When Miss Li Hong brought the lottery ticket home, Dahae saw the lottery ticket. She knew that her foster mother had committed this scam. Miss Li Hong praised Dahae for doing a good job with a sarcastic tone. The next day, Dahae asked Guiju out. She told him that his father was tricked by Mrs. Li Hong for money, so now his father is not home because Mrs. Manholm chased his father away. This is just the beginning, so she hopes he will stop following her if he doesn't want his family to be broken, because the person Mrs. Li Hong is targeting might be Mrs. Manholm. The person who saved her has a scar on his neck, but he doesn't, so that person isn't Guiju. Instead of trying to save her, he should save his family first, especially his mother, because she has the ability to dream the future. So he went home to find his mother, but she wasn't home. Mrs. Manholm was having dinner with Dong Hee and her lover. The two were presenting the idea that in the future, they would use the building to do a project for a beauty salon and gym when they got married and inherited the 50 billion building. Mrs. Manholm was having a headache because of her husband's problem. When Dong Hee's boyfriend kept talking non-stop, she coldly asked Dong Hee, "I heard you say that your boyfriend betrayed you." Dong Hee's face became sad, and she told her boyfriend to go out. When the two of them were alone, Dong Hee realized that her father had left the house. She said that her father left because he was upset with her mother's control. Even she had to give up her dream to follow her mother's wishes, including getting married. After saying that, she went out. Then, Mrs. Manholm went out to pay, but for some reason, her card couldn't be paid. While she was wondering what to do, Mrs. Li Hong suddenly appeared and paid the bill for Mrs. Manholm without hesitation. Then, Mrs. Li Hong said that Mrs. Manholm's complexion didn't look very good. Mrs. Li Hong even invited Mrs. Manholm to the sauna. At house, Guiju searched his father's pocket, realizing that his father had gone to the dance hall was the direct cause of his father leaving the house. In-A is being bullied by the whole class because of what happened the other day. The classmates said that In-A pretends to be gentle and is also cared for by a gangster uncle. Hiram holds her hand and pretends to care for In-A, but In-A reads Hiram's mind and pushes Hiram away. The homeroom teacher calls Guiju because In-A is absent without permission. He worriedly goes to the sauna to ask Dahae to find In-A with him. They can't call In-A because her phone is broken. While the two are at a loss, In-Tai appears and says that he knows the places In-A often goes to because he often follows her. So he takes the two to the places she often goes. In-A often eats instant noodles alone, drinks coffee alone, and goes to the park to play with her phone alone. But they can't find In-A in those places. The three of them split up to look for In-A. Dahae decides to go to the sauna while Guiju goes home. When Dahae arrived at the bathhouse, she only saw Li Hong taking Manholm home, and In-A was not there. Li Hong saw Dahae's expression. She said that she was really worried and wanted to befriend Manholm because she wanted to bring the two of them together and had no intention of harming Manholm. But Dahae repaid her by bringing the winning lottery ticket to the Bok family instead of giving it to her. Dahae said that Guiju gave Dahae the money to pay off debt and leave Mrs. Li Hong, but Dahae chose to live with Li Hong because she felt sorry for Li Hong. Mrs. Li Hong is always sad because of her dead daughter, but if Mrs. Li Hong dares to do something bad to the Bok family, Dahae is ready to fight back. Then Dahae leaves the sauna despite Mrs. Li Hong's screaming. On this side, Guiju returns home but cannot find In-A. He searches in the drawer and finds a broken phone. At this time, Dahae also arrives. Guiju expresses that he is not a good father for leaving In-A alone for too long and does not understand her psychology. Suddenly, Dahae sees Guiju of the future and is informed by him that In-A is in the school gym. The two immediately run there. At the gym, In-A's classmates are gossiping about her boyfriend leaving the dance club because he confessed to someone in the club but was rejected. The classmates are curious about who that person is. Suddenly, Hiram sees In-A dozing off in the gym storage room. Hiram is angry about what In-A did to her, so Hiram came up with the idea of punishing In-A. Hiram secretly locked the warehouse door from the outside and trapped In-A inside. When In-A woke up, she was scared when she realized she was locked up. She tried to knock on the door and call for someone but no one heard. In-A was scared, worried, and didn't know what to do. That night, Guiju and Dahae ran to the gym and knocked on the door continuously. It attracted the security guard, so he took the key and successfully rescued In-A. When the three of them went to eat, In-A told Guiju that she couldn't go to school. There were too many eyes watching in the school, which made Guiju confused. Then In-A ran into the bathroom. Dahae ran after her and saw her crying inside. Ina said that she just wanted to fit in with her friends, but she didn't understand why things turned out like this. She would rather be invisible like before. Dahae listened to Ina and she shared that she had experienced a similar situation. Dahae was once locked in a warehouse and no one knew. Then there was a fire and luckily someone came to save Dahae. Dahae wanted Ina to know that no matter how difficult it was, there would be someone willing to overcome that difficulty to help Ina. Dahae's encouragement made Ina feel warm and less worried. When Dahae went out, she advised Guiju not to ask too many questions about school later. Instead, he just needed to look into Ina's eyes and he would have the answer. Then the father and daughter went to the park. Guiju invited Ina to drink coffee. He knew this was his daughter's favorite drink after Hungtae told him, but Ina brushed it away, causing the coffee cup to spill. Worried about his daughter, Guiju took off his glasses and offered to clean them. That action made Ina and Guiju look at each other. Ina read her father's thoughts about her. Guiju apologized for leaving Ina alone all this time. Guiju wanted to make it up to her in the future and spend more time with her. She had read all of his thoughts. This time, Guiju realized that Ina's superpower was to read other people's thoughts when looking into their eyes. Ina said that she didn't want him to go back to the moment she was born because that moment had made both her father and mother suffer. Guiju realized that Ina's ability was to read other people's thoughts, which was why Ina always avoided other people's eyes. Going back 7 years ago, when Ina's mother was driving, Ina's mother accidentally made eye contact with her. Ina read her mother's thoughts, saying that she was born on the day of the fire. Ina innocently asked her mother if her birth was wrong. Ina's mother was surprised by Ina's question, so she drove and got into an accident. From then on, Ina always thought that her birth was a mistake. That made Ina feel guilty all this time. After learning about his daughter's situation, Guiju hugged Ina and kept apologizing for not knowing her thoughts. He said the moment she was born had a very special meaning to him. This time, Ina saw someone who, when she looked into her eyes, she was no longer afraid of that person. On the contrary, she felt warmer. That was her father. Then Guiju helped Ina learn to ride a bike. When Ina was able to ride a bike, Dahae, Guiju and Ina were all very very happy. At the sauna, Mrs. Manhome woke up and told her dream that Mrs. Lee Hong's eldest daughter was still alive. Mrs. Lee Hong will soon hug the child and cry and say that it was lucky that her child was still alive. It turned out that Da-hye had met Mrs. Manhome before and told that Mrs. Lee Hong had a daughter, but she died when she was young, while Mrs. Lee Hong was in prison. If Mrs. Manhome talked about Mrs. Hong's dead daughter, Mrs. Manhome would have the initiative and Mrs. Lee Hong would waver. In another development, Dong-hee was climbing stairs under Grace's training to lose weight. Then the two went to the rooftop. Grace asked Dong-hee to let her fly with her ability, but Dong-hee refused. While riding her bike, Ina met her boyfriend again. She was flustered and was about to leave, but her boyfriend called her back and gave her a pair of glasses. Her boyfriend said that if Ina hated him so much, he would try his best to avoid them when they met at school. After saying that, her boyfriend left. Suddenly, Ina expressed his feelings for her boyfriend, surprising him. At the same time, Guiju and Da-hye were talking to each other. Guiju realized that Da-hye knew about Ina's ability. Suddenly, Guiju returned to the moment Ina was born. Looking at his family before his eyes, Guiju felt extremely happy. When he returned, he said that he would save Da-hye. After that, Guiju took out 2 rings and put them on both of their hands. This time, Guiju admitted that he liked her. The two looked at each other and kissed passionately. Meanwhile, Mrs. Manhome was having a nightmare about Guiju. Mrs. Manhome went to the dance hall where her husband was sitting and shouted his name, forcing him to leave. After seeing her husband, Mrs. Manhome panicked and said that he and his son might die. Da-hye returned to the Bok family. The whole family welcomed her. They had lunch together in an uncomfortable atmosphere. Guiju didn't notice it. He happily said that it felt like a dream when the whole family had dinner like this. It turned out that Mrs. Manhome had come to Da-hye before and told about her dream. In it, their family was holding a funeral for Guiju. It was a funeral without a body, so it was possible that 13 years ago he saved Da-hye and died in that fire. Hearing this, Da-hye wanted to stop Guiju from going back to the past, but Mrs. Manhome said that she tried to change her dream when she learned that her father had died, but failed. So she wanted Guiju to be happy in her last moments, even if she had to rely on a scammer. So she asked Da-hye to return to her house to help Guiju have happy times. At school, everyone knew that Hiram had intentionally locked Ine in the warehouse. This time, Hiram was shunned by her friends for living a fake life, while Ine and her boyfriend were now a couple. Hiram went to Ine and explained that she didn't do that. However, Ine replied that Hiram should hide her feelings well. Now everyone knows Hiram's evil nature. After saying that, Ine ran towards her boyfriend, leaving Hiram standing alone and sad. At home, Guiju suggested to his father that he wanted the whole family to move to a smaller house because the family currently couldn't afford the expenses of living in such a big house. Mr. Soon-gu wanted to refuse because this house was the house where the Bok family had lived for generations. Suddenly, Mrs. Manhome appeared and agreed to Guiju's request. Then she signaled him to enter the room. It turned out that the two of them had made a pact to return for their son. When the time came for Guiju to die, they would divorce. Mrs. Manhome wanted Mr. Soon-gu and Dong-hee to keep this secret from Guiju. The 50 billion house would also belong to Dong-hee. Everyone was heartbroken when they learned that Guiju was about to die, and Guiju wanted to go back to the moments. Ine was born to save Da-hye, but she stopped him. She wanted him to save her 13 years ago when they got married. At the bathhouse, Mrs. Lee Hong had prepared a plot. It turned out that Hung-tae was not Lee Hong's husband, but Mrs. Lee Hong's younger brother. Right now, Da-hye did not know her adoptive mother's plot. She was enjoying happy days with Guiju and Ine. Only Ine and Guiju did not know that Guiju would die if he returned to save Da-hye. 5 days later, Guiju and Da-hye drove to the sea together. The two happily talked about a movie and argued about what color shirt the female lead was wearing. They both bet that whoever lost would have to fulfill a condition given by the other. When Guiju was about to check online, Da-hye advised him to go back to the moment he watched the movie to confirm, and he happily agreed. Unexpectedly, when he returned, the car got into an accident. Da-hye disappeared. The police came to rescue Guiju and looked for Da-hye. They thought that Guiju was so scared that he didn't remember anything about the accident. The truth was that when the accident happened, he was in the past and couldn't give a detailed statement to the police. The police searched all day, and in the end, they only found a jacket that Guiju bought for Da-hye. Guiju held the jacket and cried, so he was abandoned again. The next morning, the police left Guiju alone there. A few days later, he went to the bathhouse to ask Mrs. Lee Hong about it. He thought she had staged Da-hye's disappearance as an accident, but she denied it and cried out in pain, asking why he couldn't have prevented the accident when he had superpowers. In the following days, Guiju continued to get drunk. He regretted not being able to prevent the accident. The whole family was sad. Everyone wondered why this accident happened exactly like 7 years ago. Dong-hee thought that if this happened to prevent Guiju from going back to the past, it would be a blessing. Mrs. Manhome saw this as an opportunity for Guiju not to go back to the past. She went to Guiju and convinced him that losing his ability might be a gift from their ancestors. Dong-hye was trying on wedding dresses. She had successfully lost weight. Her boyfriend was very happy and kept urging her to hold the wedding, even though she wanted to postpone it because Guiju was having problems, but he still didn't care. When he went out, he called another girl to promise to give her a floor in Dong-hee's building. It turned out that his philandering nature had not changed. At the junkyard, Guiju was still trying to find the car that had the accident, looking for information about Da-hye's disappearance. That made everyone feel annoyed. Dong-hee and Ine also came. Dong-hee advised him to let go of the past and accept the truth. After Dong-hee left, Ine recounted that there was a time when she looked into Da-hye's eyes, but she saw that Da-hye was singing the national anthem. It seemed that Da-hye was hiding something, so Guiju tried to go back to the past. He returned to the exact moment when the two were lying in bed. He told Da-hye to absolutely not drive to the beach on a rainy day, otherwise she would have an accident. Then he returned to the present and realized that nothing had changed. Both wondered why Guiju had warned her, but Da-hye still accepted the trip. Ine said that maybe Da-hye knew she had an accident, but for some reason she still went despite Guiju's warning. Then Ine went to the sauna to find Hung-tae. That was the only clue at the moment. Seeing Hung-tae outside the door, Ine tried to ask about Da-hye, but Hung-tae avoided her. He put on sunglasses because he knew Ine's ability and went into the sauna. Mrs. Lee Hong heard Ine's conversation. Hung-tae explained that Ine was just talking nonsense. Mrs. Lee Hong asked Hung-tae if he had finished handling it. Hung-tae confirmed that he had finished handling it, but she asked why after that. Hung-tae went to the beach again. Hung-tae replied that he wanted to take a walk. Mrs. Lee Hong asked to check Hung-tae's call history. Seeing nothing, she became suspicious and forced Hung-tae to go to the beach he had been to. Before Hung-tae took Mrs. Lee Hong away, he made eye contact with Ine. Thanks to that, Ine knew that Da-hye was still alive and where her current address was. Ine hurriedly hurriedly ran home and reported to Guiju that Dahe was still alive. It turned out that the last time Dahe met Mrs. Man home, she realized that in order to save Guiju, everyone had to prevent Guiju from returning to the past. So Dahe told Mrs. Manheim that she would fake her death so that Guiju could not use his ability. Only Hyung-tae knew about this detailed plan. Dahe begged Hyung-tae to help her and said that this was her last scam. So on the day of the accident, Dahe suggested that Guiju return to the past. After he left, she and Hyung-tae deliberately staged the scene as if there was a car accident. Then she threw her shirt into the river and the two left. Back in the present, Dahe was at the beach. A moment later, Guiju came looking for her. Dahe saw Guiju and ran away worriedly, but he caught up with her and asked why she lied about her death. At this point, Dahe could only tell him the truth. At this time, no one in his house saw him, so they were very worried. Ina ran out and said that Guiju was looking for Dahe. Mrs. Manhome was very scared when she heard. Ina saw Mrs. Manhome's strange reaction. She took off her glasses and read Mrs. Manhome's thoughts. This time, both Ina and Guiju realized that there was a possibility that Guiju would die if they returned. They both realized that Dahe did everything just to keep Guiju safe. Even if he had to live in torment, she would die. Guiju was not happy was okay, as long as it kept him alive. Guiju said that it was thanks to meeting her that he was able to escape from his long-standing depression. If he had not saved her in the past, he would not have been happy either. The two hugged and kissed passionately, spending a happy time at the beach. The next day, Guiju went to buy breakfast and met Mrs. Lee Hong and Hyung-tae there. When she saw Guiju buy 2 portions, she was sure Dahe was still alive, but she wondered why Dahe would trick Guiju just to run away from her. Guiju said that Dahe was running away from him, not from her, and he explained that he would go back in time to save Dahe from the fire 13 years ago, and he could have died in that fire, so Dahe faked his death to keep him alive. Dahe woke up and didn't see Guiju. She panicked and ran out of the house and see Guiju come back after buying food. Only then did Dahe breathe a sigh of relief. After that, the two of them had breakfast together on the beach. Dahe looked at Guiju's neck, which still had no scar, and she felt relieved. Dahe said that everyone in the house knew about this, except for Ina, but maybe she would know soon too. Sure enough, when the two returned, Ina was sad because she knew everything. She blamed herself for revealing and ruining Dahe's plan. Then she went upstairs. Dong-hee looked for Guiju to talk. Dong-hee recounted that many years ago, she was a very famous supermodel, so she had the opportunity to perform at the last, which was the most prestigious position on the catwalk. However, Mrs. Manhome stopped Dong-hee, saying that she had a dream that the last performer fell to the floor and was seriously injured. Therefore, Dong-hee did not go to the catwalk, so someone else had to perform in her place, with shoes made specifically for Dong-hee. Because the shoes did not fit, the unfortunate girl fell and landed on the floor just as Mrs. Manhome said. Dong-hee realized that she had made the wrong decision. She regretted and was sad. Her dream of becoming a model disappeared, and since then, Dong-hee has been eating constantly and has become so fat. On this side, Mrs. Manhome thanks Dahe. Through this, Mrs. Manhome knows that Dahe has been wholeheartedly helping Guiju. Dahe convinces Mrs. Manhome that she will find another way to prevent Guiju from returning to the past. This time, Mrs. Manhome advises Dahe to follow her dream, because if Mrs. Manhome dreams, it will definitely come true. This ability is not a good thing. It is a curse, because she always dreams of bad luck for her children. Mrs. Manhome said that recently she dreamed of Dong-hee and another woman with messy hair in Dong-hee's and husband's bridal chamber. So she thought that they were fighting, so she thought that Dong-hee's marriage would not be happy. However, she could not tell her daughter, because Dong-hee had previously followed Mrs. Manhome's dream. Her supermodel career was ruined. Dahe understood everything. Dahe went to Ina's room and saw her blaming herself. Dahe said that everyone in the family was born with superpowers, but instead of being grateful, the whole family tried to hide it and thought it was a curse. So Dahe comforted Ina that she would turn that curse into something good. The next day, Dong-hee's fiancé took her to see a new apartment. He excitedly introduced the apartment, constantly talking about how much time and effort he had spent looking for this beautiful apartment. When Dong-hee mentioned that they would not buy this apartment, but live with her family, he looked unhappy and said that living like that was not convenient for Dong-hee. He quickly urged Dong-hee to buy the apartment as their newlywed home. He also bragged that the deposit here was a bit high, but he convinced the owner to lower the price. That left Dong-hee speechless. He had an affair with his mistress, which was discovered by Dahe. Dahe took a photo of Dong-hee's fiancé cheating. Then she sent the photo on his phone and threatened him. He had to give her 200,000, or he had to cancel the wedding with Dong-hee and disappear. He refused and took back his phone to delete the photo. Hyung-tae suddenly appeared, pulled his shirt, and made him not dare to touch Dahe anymore. Then Dahe bought milk for Hyung-tae and asked him if he was okay. Mrs. Lee Hong knew he lied to protect Dahe. Hyung-tae only replied that he should not interfere in other people's family matters. Dahe refused, saying that if it weren't for Guiju 13 years ago, she would have died in the fire. Hyung-tae went home and reported the incident to Mrs. Lee Hong. She realized that both Dahe and Guiju tried to save each other. She called Grace and asked them both to help Dahe kick Dong-hee's boyfriend out of the house. At Guiju's house, he visited Dong-hee and found out that his sister was secretly eating snacks. Dong-hee was sad because her powers had not returned, even though she tried to lose weight. Guiju went back to the past when the two sisters were young. At that time, little Guiju was in the hospital because of malnutrition. He didn't even want to eat rice, so Dong-hee, who was a chubby girl, ate Guiju's rice. Seeing her sister eating deliciously, Guiju expressed that he wanted to eat rice too, so Dong-hee fed him, and the two sisters laughed and talked happily. At that time, Dong-hee flew everywhere, regardless of her weight. Therefore, Guiju realized that it wasn't her weight that hindered Dong-hee's superpowers. She could fly because she was happy, so he told Dong-hee to break up with her boyfriend because she herself was not happy in this marriage. However, Dong-hee was still hesitant. The next day, Dong-hee's fiancé found a place to borrow money to get the full 200,000 won. When he was depressed and didn't know where to find money, Hyung-tae approached him and introduced him to a place to borrow money. After Dong-hee's boyfriend had enough 200,000 won, he gave it to Dahe, which surprised her. So her plan failed. As soon as he left, Grace went to Dahe and said, "I'm glad you're alive." Grace convinced Dahe to let her join the scam. Grace didn't want to see Dong-hee broken down because of that terrible boyfriend. So when the group discovered that Dong-hee's fiancé brought his mistress to the newlywed house to have an affair, Grace immediately took Dong-hee there. After Dong-hee saw everything, he knelt down and apologized to Dong-hee, but she didn't forgive him and insisted on breaking up. Dong-hee also canceled the house contract and demanded the money he still owed her. At that time, Dahe appeared with 200,000 won and said that she had already asked for money for Dong-hee. When he saw them acting friendly with each other, he realized that he had been tricked. He immediately chased after the two girls to get the money back. In the process, he accidentally pushed Grace down the stairs. Dong-hee saw that scene. She didn't think much and rushed down despite the worry that her ability might be exposed, and successfully saved Grace. Grace looked at Dong-hee with grateful eyes. The two of them excitedly flew around the city. After returning, both of their hair were messed up by the wind. Da-hee realized that this scene was exactly like Mrs. Manhome's dream. However, the two of them cried out of happiness. What Mrs. Manhome dreamed of was not entirely true. The three girls hugged each other happily. However, Dong-hee's ex-boyfriend saw everything. He opened his phone and recorded Dong-hee flying in the sky. Dong-hee brought money back to her mother and exclaimed that she almost fell. Da-hee told her everything that happened to Dong-hee. Da-hee affirmed that thanks to Mrs. Manhome's dream, they had time to prepare in advance, so everyone had more hope of saving Guiju. The whole family laughed and talked happily. On the other side, Ine was invited by Guiju to the amusement park. The father and daughter had a happy moment together. Guiju bought cotton candy for his daughter. He said that he would save Da-hee and make everyone happy, and the moment Ine was born was the best gift for him. So he advised Ine not to be insecure about herself. Ine's ability is a great ability. This solved the problem that had been in her heart for so long. The father and daughter hugged each other emotionally. At this time, Da-hee returned to the sauna to see her mother. At that moment, Mrs. Manhome also arrived. Mrs. Lee Hong gave Mrs. Manhome the winning lottery ticket and told her to let Guiju and Da-hee get married. Hearing this, Da-hee was extremely surprised. She realized that her mother was the mastermind behind the scam of Dong-hee's ex-boyfriend last time. Da-hee returned to the bathroom and asked Mrs. Lee Hong why she did that. Mrs. Lee Hong admitted that when she heard that Da-hee had died, she felt extremely regretful. Then she hugged Da-hee and tearfully shared that she did not expect the mother-daughter relationship to be so close and deep after all the years they had been together. She said that it was fortunate that Da-hee was still alive, so Mrs. Manhome's dream came true. Mrs. Lee Hong congratulated Da-hee on having a husband's family who truly loved her. Mrs. Lee Hong told Da-hee to live happily with Guiju. Da-hee was moved to hear those words. She did not expect her adoptive mother to truly care about her. That night, Guiju treated the family to the fish dish that Mr. Soon-gu had made. The whole family felt nostalgic. Guiju revealed that he had returned to the past and learned Mr. Soon-gu's cooking recipe. Everyone was happy because he knew how to use his ability. At school, Ine and her friends were busy practicing dancing to participate in an upcoming competition. Hiram was no longer in the dance group because she was shunned. However, Ine sincerely wished for Hiram to return. Mrs. Manhome continued to have nightmares about that fire. When she woke up in panic, Mr. Soon-gu brought her a glass of water and offered to play a song for her. Then Mrs. Manhome went out and saw her husband practicing dancing. He invited her to dance to the melodious music. Thanks to that, the two of them were no longer angry with each other. Guiju saw his parents happy from afar. His face involuntarily smiled. At this moment, he returned to the past when his parents were young. The two were dancing together. Everyone was colorless. Suddenly, a colorful little girl ran past. She was Da-hee when she was young. Guiju followed the girl for a while. He realized that she was being teased by her friends because she didn't know how to ride a bike. So Guiju stepped forward and held the bike for her. That moment made both of them happy. Little Da-hee was happy and didn't notice that someone was helping her behind. Suddenly, the surroundings became colorful. Guiju was surprised. This was the first time he had returned to the past so vividly. While helping little Da-hee, he accidentally got injured by a tree branch. When he returned home, Guiju discovered that because of the tree branch in the past, his neck had a scar. Knowing that his time was running out, Guiju held back his grief and went to eat with his family. The next day, when he went to the pharmacy to ask about his scar, the pharmacist guessed that he was allergic to plants and that it would heal quickly in half a day to a week, so his time left was at most a week. In class, Ine saw Hiram being bullied. Ine approached Hiram and suggested that she join the dance club in the upcoming competition. With her ability, Ine knew that Hiram was looking forward to this performance. Ine also wanted to make up with Hiram. Hiram refused but was very grateful. At the gym, Grace and Hung Tae arrived. Grace said that she wanted to introduce Hung Tae to Dong-hee. Although Dong-hee liked Hung Tae at first sight, she still said that she didn't want to get to know anyone at this time. This made Grace feel strange. Grace replied that Hung Tae came here to apply for the coach position, not to date. Grace's answer made Dong-hee extremely embarrassed. When she looked closely at Hung Tae's face, Dong-hee realized that he was a food delivery man. His delivery method made her very satisfied because he always kept the food intact, not broken or cold. That made her really like Hung Tae. Grace exclaimed that Dong-hee's taste in lovers was very unique. Dong-hee's ex-lover was also present at the gym not far away. When he found out the truth that he was deceived, he was extremely angry. That night, he went to see Dong-hee and begged her to come back to him, otherwise he would post the video of her flying online. Dong-hee said that those videos could be made with editing software. After saying that, Dong-hee left. He intended to chase after her, but at that moment, Hung Tae came and scared him. Hung Tae threw his phone into the pond and left, leaving him to search for it. Mrs. Manhome continued to dream about the fire, so she told Guiju that she saw a clock falling from the wall and there were people struggling in the air during the fire. So Guiju met co-worker to investigate it, but the co-worker said that he had not remembered anything about the fire for 10 years. Guiju asked co-worker to find the report on the fire, and he agreed. Recently, Da-hee noticed that Guiju was wearing a turtleneck even though it was very hot. When he fell asleep, she lifted his shirt and realized that he had a scar on his neck. Da-hee knew that Guiju's time was running out. Suddenly, Guiju woke up and asked her to keep this a secret from everyone. He said that he got the scar when he went back in time. Before, he couldn't touch anything, but now it happened. So Da-hee realized that the fire 13 years ago could really cost him his life. The two hugged each other in despair. Mrs. Manhome told Dong-hee that she dreamed of her flying in front of everyone at Ine's upcoming performance. However, Dong-hee didn't care about what she said. Dong-hee still decided to go there to cheer for Ine. When the family arrived at Ine's school, they unexpectedly met Mrs. Lee Hong's family, who also came to cheer for her. The two families walked into the auditorium together. On the other side, Guiju and Da-hee bought flowers for Ine. Suddenly, Guiju received information that there was a report of a fire that day. He asked Da-hee to deliver the flowers to Ine first. Then Guiju ran to his colleague and was shown a map of the school. Da-hee went in to give flowers to Ine. Ine was uneasy and worried when Guiju did not come. Dong-hee received a text message from her ex-lover. He sent a photo saying that he was with Ine. Then he asked Dong-hee to go to the waiting room on the 4th floor. Because she was worried about Ine, Dong-hee went up there as he said. When Dong-hee arrived, he unexpectedly prepared roses and candles to confess to her. His purpose was to win her affection, which made Dong-hee feel extremely disgusted. Currently, Ine was worried behind the set. When she saw Guiju coming, she felt relieved. However, Hiram still hadn't appeared appeared when the other group's performance was almost over. When the group was about to perform without Hiram arrived at that moment. The group put aside their previous grudges and happily pulled Hiram into the group. Then the group went on stage. Because Ine was so nervous, she stood there. Seeing that the boyfriend came over and took off Ine's glasses. The boyfriend knew that Ine was nervous about appearing in front of so many people. He then encouraged Ine, and thanks to the boyfriend's words, Ine felt more confident. The group performed very well. On stage, Ine thought to Saint Guiju that she had made good friends. Now Ine was no longer seen as invisible, so she didn't want Guiju to worry about her anymore. After the group took a photo, Ine realized that Hiram had gone out to the stairs. She went over and talked to Hiram. Ine said that she really wanted to be friends with Hiram. Why did Hiram hate her so much? Hiram blamed Ine for not being sincere with her. Why did they both like the same person, but Ine didn't tell her anything? Because of that, Hiram felt that Ine did not consider her a friend. Hearing this, Ine told Hiram that she had the superpower to read other people's thoughts. Hiram replied that she also had the superpower, which was to attract other people's gazes. Dai looked at Guiju and suddenly realized that the clothes he was wearing were very familiar. Memories flooded back. She remembered that those were the clothes he wore the day he appeared in the past to inform her about Ine's location in the gym, so she told Guiju that. Guiju immediately went out to return to the past. He told Dai that after he finished reporting Ine's location, he would return immediately. Dai understood that because Guiju did not have much time left here, so he was in such a hurry. Then he returned to the past to inform Guiju that Ine was in the stage warehouse. On the other side, Donghee's ex-lover was trying to hold on to her. When she refused, he brought out gasoline and threatened to burn everything down. At this time, there was a group performing somersaults in the air on the stage. Mrs. Monhoom found this scene very familiar. She realized that her recent dreams were not scenes from the past. It was about to catch fire now, she informed her husband. So he went to press the fire alarm, aiming to evacuate everyone before the fire. On the way, Mr. Sungu passed by Dahe and told her that there was going to be a fire. At this time, Dahe started to get scared. She wondered why at this time. Dahe searched for Ine. Donghee looked at her ex-lover's reaction. She was completely calm because she knew he was a coward. Surely he wouldn't dare to light the fire. As she predicted, he only did that to threaten her. Donghee admitted that was what she liked about him, because he might be a bad guy, but not a cruel person. You're just a useless guy. Then she turned and walked away. She also told him to clean up the place. Hearing Donghee's words, he scolded her while cleaning. He accidentally put the gasoline-soaked cloth into the candlelight and caused a fire. He was scared and ran away. A while later, Guiju returned. Seeing the chaotic scene before his eyes, he hurriedly ran to find his relatives. Everyone in the audience was panicking as the fire was about to spread here. At that time, Donghee saw that the staff could not lower the fire curtain because it was caught in the light bulb. She thought for a moment and flew up there to lower the curtain and successfully helped everyone escape the danger. At that time, everyone was so busy running outside that they did not pay attention to her, so her ability was not discovered. Ine and Hiram were trapped in the fire because the roller shutter was locked. Hiram felt afraid that she would be trapped here. Ine ran to find another way. A while later, Guiju ran to break the roller shutter. Hiram pointed him in the direction of Ine. He hurriedly chased in the direction Hiram pointed to save Ine. At this time, Ine was about to suffocate from the smoke. Suddenly she heard Dahe calling her. The two met again. Suddenly, the wall containing the clock was about to collapse. Luckily, Guiju arrived in time and caught it. He realized that this was the dream his mother told him. He told Dahe to quickly take Ine away from here. After saving the two people, he would return to the past as soon as Dahe and In got out of there. The wall collapsed. Guiju suddenly returned to the moment Ine was born. Guiju cried with emotion. He finally returned to this moment. He silently thanked his ex-wife. Then he ran really fast to Dahe's school. Now everything had become colorful. He could touch everything. At the same time, everyone saw Guiju. When he arrived, he saw his senior. When Guiju called the senior name, this time he turned his head in response. However, he still went into the fire to save people. Very quickly after that, the entrance suddenly collapsed, and just like that, the senior died in the fire. Although Guiju was sad, he knew that he still had to stay rational. He quickly got the fire extinguisher. Because he had read about the school's map earlier, he was able to run quickly to the gym's warehouse to save Dahe. When he got there, he saw her fate from smoke inhalation. He gave her oxygen and carried her out, but the way out was extremely difficult. The two of them struggled to reach the window. Below, people had set up a cushion for people jumping from the upper floors. Guiju gave Dahe the family heirloom ring and told her to keep it safe. Then he pushed her down onto the cushion and told Dahe that this was just the beginning. They would meet again. As Dahe fell out, the fire broke out and killed Guiju. Back to the present, Donghee's ex-lover was imprisoned for causing a fire. Luckily, no one was injured in the fire. The family held a funeral for Guiju. A few years later, everyone has a new life. Hung Tae and Grace invited Donghee to use her flying ability to help them fly a few laps in the air. Mrs. Manhome is now a regular at Mrs. Lee Hong's sauna. She sleeps very well there and often shares her dreams with Mrs. Lee Hong. Since then, Mrs. Lee Hong has avoided many troubles. Today, Mrs. Manhome dreamed that a distinguished guest appeared in her house. Dahe is no longer afraid of fire like before. She has a son with Guiju, a very active boy. The family doesn't know what his ability is. While Dahe was packing her clothes, her son suddenly came and gave her the toy ball that they lost yesterday. Dahe wondered where her son got the ball from. The boy honestly said that he took it yesterday. Dahe guessed that the boy had the ability to get lost things back, so Dahe asked the boy to find Guiju. The boy sat for a while, and sure enough, Guiju returned to their family. Guiju stood there holding his son's hand, and Dahe emotionally congratulated Guiju on his return. Today's movie ends here. Thank you everyone for watching. Goodbye, and see you again in the next videos.